Hey, good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Have you went to sleep at all last night? I have not gotten any sleep. Lord, I don't know what I took. Was it the hot magnesium? Now that magnesium should have put me to sleep. I don't know if it was the late piece of cake I ate. I don't know. But I have not slept a week, a wink. So I said, well, stop trying and just go on and get Diddy out the way. We gonna listen to his appeal court judge hearing for his appeal. And but before we go into the appeal, let me see. Hey Cynthia, girl, I have not went to sleep at all. Can you believe that? I'm too old to be not getting no sleep. And me like a just, oh my goodness. I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, I got up taking all my vitamins. I take a lot of supplements. And Lord, I don't sit here, vitamin one a day, vitamin B complexes, everything that's going to keep me up. Oh, you slept for me. Well, that's all I mean. At least one of us can get some sleep. I'll take that, Lord. I take it. Did you sleep hard? Look at my voice, Lord. I need some honey. I need to. I need to go to the grocery store. I need to re-up. I'm sure it's quite a few vitamins in there I haven't taken. So something that I'm out of got me all out of whack, if that make any sense. I'm so routine normally, and I don't know why I haven't. But anyway, I'm gonna take care of that. But anyway, I'm gonna start out on Trump first, and then we're gonna go off into the oral arguments of Diddy. Did he do it? Did he not? Did he? It's just so much going on. Trump, his wife, Diddy, Epstein slash Palm Beach Pete, plus this diversion, this war, and why, the war is going on, deals are being made, laws are being passed, the military is going to automatically try to snatch the boys. It's just, Lord, we need a healing. Hey, Crystal, we missed you last night, a couple of hours ago. But hey. Let's go on in. I'm gonna start with a little update on Trump, and then I'm gonna go into Diddy's oral argument. Is that all right? Let's go.
World leaders are throwing a weak and pathetic Donald Trump aside, and they are building their own armies to assert themselves in the absence of a United States security umbrella. Specifically, Europe is absolutely furious at Donald Trump's continuous threats. Donald Trump continuously saying, I'm going to withdraw from NATO, and Europe is not doing enough. And then when Europe tries to step up and focus on its own defense, Donald Trump's like, you better buy our American equipment. And Europe is like, enough. So the Prime Minister of Spain, Pedro Sanchez, stepped forward, and he's like, you know what we need to focus on right here? We need to focus on building a European army. Let's just bring this army together right now. We don't need the United States. Let's go. Also, President Zelensky of Ukraine saying, let's just bring together some of the biggest powers in Europe. Ukraine will join. We'll build our own army. And if the United States is going to withdraw from NATO, like Donald Trump keeps on saying, we don't need them. We can be a superpower together. There is strength in numbers. While all of that was going on, too, you had tens of thousands, may I say, hundreds of thousands of people out in Hungary to cheer on the pro-democracy TISA coalition against Viktor Orban's Fidesz authoritarian pro-Putin coalition. We're 24 hours or so away from the election in Hungary, or less at this point, and the people are out there saying they want to be part of the European Union and they don't want anything to do with Vladimir Putin. They had this mass rally where they were saying, go home Russia, go home Russia, and this follows Donald Trump making post after post saying, everybody vote for Viktor Orban. Hungary, if you want money, if you want that American cash, you better vote Viktor Orban because we'll financially help you. And the people of Hungary are saying, we know your scams, we know your tricks, we know that you, Donald Trump, are just like Putin. You are authoritarian, vile pieces of trash who just want to destroy our country and set us back. Enough. We are joining forces with the European Union. So let's go through this one by one right here. Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez of Spain saying, we are ready to move forward with a common European army. Not in 10 years or two, but right now, tomorrow. Europe, let's form an army together and screw Donald Trump and screw what he's turned the United States. And this is the true sentiment of Europe right now. Here, play this clip.
You've probably heard what Spain's proposal is. We are ready to move forward towards a common European army, not in 10 years, not in 2 years, but right now, tomorrow, if you'll excuse the colloquial expression. And those who believe, by the way, that this decision is optional are mistaken. In the world we live in today, medium powers like those that make up the European Union, we only have one way to assert ourselves from a security and defense standpoint, and that is to build a common defense and jointly assume our vulnerabilities. Otherwise, we let others exploit our vulnerabilities and weaknesses against us.
More from Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez of Spain. And he's also saying we need to speak with moral clarity here. And that means across the world where we see injustice,
Hey,
where we see
Esther.
genocide, where we
Child, I
see
ain't went to
massacre,
sleep at all.
we call it out. We can't just be selective in it. And he said, what we
Taking
see in Gaza, call it out. He says,
energy
what we see
bad.
in Lebanon, we must not let Lebanon become the new Gaza, as Donald
Energy
Trump
boost.
and Netanyahu were just massacring the people in Lebanon. And Netanyahu's been doing it for a while, but even after the ceasefire, you have Netanyahu killing 258 people in one day,
Oh, yeah,
over
that's horrible.
1,100 casualties. Watch Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez with specific moral clarity right here, calling out Netanyahu and Trump and authoritarians across the country and saying, we need to stand up for basic compassion and human decency. Remember, we're dealing with human beings here.
Nope,
Do you know
not
what
at
the
all.
banana can do to your liver?
My eyes ain't closed
Bananas
at
are actually
all.
edible when they're still green.
Here, play this clip.
Oh, Europe, that stands firm in the defense of international law and a global order based on rules. No, we cannot simply content ourselves with just lament and frustration. Ultimately, one only needs to look at Gaza to see the consequences of this ongoing violation of international law. For this reason, Europe must also be clear, because many countries in the so-called global south are watching Europe. And what they want is for us not to apply double standards, to avoid using a different yardstick depending on the case, or whether it affects Europe more or less. We must not allow a new Gaza to emerge in Lebanon, because when faced with flagrant violations of international humanitarian law, Europe has to act with consistency and integrity if we also want the rest of the world to look at us and support us in the assistance we are giving and providing to Ukraine in its fight for freedom against the invader, in this case, Putin's Russia. And that's why yesterday the Spanish government and I myself proposed that for consistency,
Did you hear that
and
Israel
also for
killed
empathy,
250
the European
people a
Union
day?
must suspend
The
its
other day
association
when it was
agreement with
supposed to be a
Israel,
ceasefire,
because
yes.
it's evident that it is trampling and violating many of the articles of that association agreement, especially those linked to respect for international law and humanitarian law.
So then in response, you have Netanyahu and Israel, who wants to move his criminal trial, which is supposed to take place in the next 24 hours. He wants to delay it by another 2 weeks. Sound familiar? Like Donald Trump's delay tactics. And he's like, there's all these national security reasons right now. My criminal trial in Israel can't take place. We're going to move that also. You have Netanyahu saying, we're not going to allow any kind of relationship going forward with Spain. And Spain's like, good, we don't want you. And you also have Netanyahu saying, we won't allow French President Emmanuel Macron to have anything to do with any future negotiations with Lebanon, because French President Emmanuel Macron expressed sympathy for the people of Lebanon who were being massacred by Netanyahu. And French President Emmanuel Macron's like, okay, I don't care. And he's been meeting with Pope Leo the 14th. And if you've been watching the videos I've been doing on Pope Leo the 14th, Pope Leo the 14th, in no uncertain terms, the American Pope, right, born in Chicago, calling out Donald Trump and his despicable regime, saying, you do not invoke the name of Jesus or God when you are out there killing innocent people. How dare you, you war criminals. And remember, there was that instance that we've been reporting on, and hat tip to Free Press and others who broke that story. They broke a good story, where the Trump regime called in the Pope's top ambassador in the United States to basically threaten, we're going to do an Avignon papacy, the 14th century papacy, where France moved or forced basically by an invasion the Pope to be in Avignon and killed the Pope and kidnapped the Pope, and the Trump regime is threatening Pope Leo the 14th like that. Absolutely freaking despicable. I want to show you right now what the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, is saying about building up an army as well. He's like, look, if the U.S. withdraws from NATO, if that's their game plan, okay. He's like, let me give you the idea of how we can match Russia. Here's what you can basically do. Here's who you can put together to build this country. Here, watch what he says right here.
According to the laws, internal questions, and etc. But there are 4 strong countries which are part of Europe, and these countries, as between us, UK, Ukraine, and Turkey, this is the army which will be stronger than the army of Russia. That is the answer. Without Ukraine and Turkey, Europe will not have similar army of that Russia has. With Ukraine, Turkey, Norway, and UK, you will control security on the seas, not one sea. And this is the answer. And that's why these 4 countries, EU also has to find a way, friendship, strategic, partner way, how to involve these 4 countries and be the strongest union of economy and security.
It's also notable, too, that as Zelensky is saying that, as Zelensky has been helping America's allies in the Middle East, who America's basically abandoned, as America's security umbrella there has just utterly collapsed, and Donald Trump's quid pro quo pay for play schemes, he ain't helping any of these Middle East countries, that's for sure. But while Zelensky is helping these Arab nations, and while the United States has abandoned them, what's Donald Trump doing? Donald Trump is meeting right now with, Donald Trump's Dmitriev, one of the top Russian envoys, is just hanging out in the United States as Donald Trump continues to lift sanctions from Russia and extend the removal of sanctions from Russia while lifting up Viktor Orban, Putin's puppet right there. Let me bring you to Hungary right here in Budapest, where the people are shouting, Russians go home, Russians go home. Here, play this clip. I'll give you another overhead image right here of the tens of thousands of people out there showing support for THORNTON, the pro-democracy coalition in Hungary, which is expected to win. We'll try to see what stunts Putin's puppet and Trump's puppet, Viktor Orban, tries to do right here. Meanwhile, in addition to the video I just showed you, that interview with President Zelensky, he's also posted the following message. I told our American partners they could understand whether Putin wanted peace by finding answers to the issue as follows. First, try to organize a meeting at the level of leaders to discuss territories. Putin has refused. Second, if he doesn't want to continue the aggression after a ceasefire, propose deploying American and European soldiers along the contact line. Putin's response was no foreign soldiers of any kind. Why? This can only mean he wants to go forward. Third, he has around 17 million square kilometers of land. Yet he tells Americans, look, what's the problem? It's only about 6,000 square kilometers. Can you imagine that someone who has millions of square kilometers, 70% of which is underdeveloped and doesn't have proper infrastructure, is asking for more? Do we really believe that all he needs is an additional 5,800 square kilometers? This is not his goal. Donbass is a strategic place in Ukraine. Once he has our industrial cities and fortifications in the region, there are only open fields and direct roads to our regional capitals. What I
Hey,
mean is that
Janet.
we understand why he wants Donbass.
I keep feeling
Again,
in my spirit that
Zelensky's not
Iran is
holding
going
back
to do
anymore.
something big,
Zelensky also
and
says, if
also
the
got
United States truly
weapons
thinks about withdrawing from
and
NATO,
this
then European
2 week
security
pause.
will be
Oh,
based
they got
solely on the
weapons.
European Union, but not in its
They
current
they
form. I think
not
that the EU
they not
is in a
asking for
situation where it needs more
a
countries.
deal.
The UK,
That's
Ukraine, Turkey,
Trump.
and Norway. These are the four
You
strong
just
countries
hope
which are
Trump
part of
don't do
Europe.
nothing on the
Together,
slick on the
the UK,
cool.
Ukraine, and
Or
Turkey
BB
have armies that
Netanyahu.
are stronger than Russia's army. Without Ukraine and Turkey, Europe can't match Russia. With the four countries on board, you can wrest control of the seas, have secure skies, and the largest land forces. It's not about offense, because when Russia makes the decision to have an army of 2.5 million people by 2030, Europe has to think about security and how to preserve its independence. The UK, once a member of the EU, there are concerns about agriculture when it comes to Turkey. But you can manage all of this if you have a really great economy. But security comes first, economy second, not vice versa. And that was more of the interview that I shared with you of President Zelensky. Meanwhile, you have Prime Minister Keir Starmer taking a trip to the Middle East to meet with Saudi Arabia and other Arab nations who are looking for allies now that the U.S. security umbrella has absolutely collapsed. The Middle East nations see that Donald Trump is essentially totally capitulating to Iran and allowing Iran to become a major world power after Donald Trump has essentially surrendered to Iran. And so now we see Prime Minister Keir Starmer showing up to try to show that at least the UK is going to support these Arab nations. Also, France announced plans to replace some Microsoft Windows systems in government with the Linux to reduce reliance on US tech and gain more control over its data. I'll show you right now the former US Army commander in Europe, who you've seen on the Midas Touch network a lot of times, Ben Hodges. He's an incredible former retired general. Here's what Ben Hodges had to say about, he goes, it's pretty remarkable, right, that over a year ago, Trump and Vance yelled at Zelensky in the Oval Office, saying that he has no cards. Now he's the one who Europe and Middle East nations are going to for help with their security, because the United States under Donald Trump is unable to provide a security umbrella and is no longer a leader of the free world. Play this clip.
It was a little over a year ago that President Zelensky was in the Oval Office getting yelled at by the president and the vice president, and this ridiculous assertion that you got no cards and all of that. And here we are today, where Ukraine is helping countries in the Gulf defend themselves against Iranian drones. And they probably are going to have Ukrainian defense industry being supported by Saudi money and money from the Emirates to purchase Ukrainian defense capabilities, even though the American president said we don't need anything from them. So what an amazing turn of events.
And just to remind you of that moment with Zelensky, here is what Zelensky said back last year during his first Oval Office
Y'all
trip
please hit
of
the like button.
this Trump regime last year, where Donald Trump was yelling at him, and J.D. Vance was like, did you say thank you? You have no cards. You have no cards at all. And Zelensky's like, I'm not talking about cards. I'm letting you know the realities of war. And we're trying to be helpful here. As Donald Trump's like, you don't have the cards. And Trump's face was turning so red, and it was so damn pathetic. Remember that moment? Here, play this clip.
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, Everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless.
You don't
God
know
bless.
that.
You will not have
You gotta-
war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
Oh, you
I'm
gonna
not
feel
telling
it?
you,
Because
I'm
you're in
answering
no
on
position
this
to
question.
dictate that.
That's
Remember
exactly what
this.
I'm not
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
You
We're going to feel
You
very
feeling-
good.
feel influence.
We're going to feel
I'm-
very
I'm
good and
telling
very
you,
strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed
From the
yourself
very-
to be in a
from
very
the
bad
very
position,
beginning
and
of
he
the
happens
war.
to be right
From
about
the
it.
very beginning of the war.
You're not in a
Mr.
good
Brown,
position.
I
You don't
was
have
there.
the cards right now. With us, you start
I'm
having
not playing
cards.
cards.
But right now, you
I'm
don't.
very
Yeah, you're playing
serious,
cards.
Mr. President.
You're
I'm
playing
very
cards.
serious.
You're
I'm
gambling
the
with the
president
lives
in
of
war.
millions of people.
You think-
Like
You're
you are
gambling
right
with
now.
World War III.
What do you
You're
think about?
gambling with
What do you
World
think
War
about?
III. And
Yeah.
what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country.
I'm
That's
with
back
all
to you.
respect to you.
Far more than a lot of people said
I'm very
they
respect.
should have.
Have you said thank you once this
A lot
entire
of
meeting?
times.
No, in this
Even
entire
today.
meeting, have you said thank
Even-
you?
And then I'm going to do another video of this early
Oh,
this
wow.
morning. But you
Ain't
can
that
see the
some-
Iranian delegation when they arrived in Islamabad. They were greeted like heroes by Pakistan, and right now they're viewed as the victors. You know, when they showed up there, all smiles, laughing, high-fiving. The Pakistanis got them flowers. Iran brought forward a huge delegation of all of its top people who got a hero's welcome in Pakistan. We'll keep you posted on all the discussions that are going on there and what's actually happening. So hit subscribe, help us get to 7 million subscribers. Thanks for watching. We're going to keep
So
giving you the
how
facts,
do I
keep
have
giving you the truth,
291
and
people
we'll learn more about this
listening with
European
a
army,
good
and we'll keep
ear, and I
reporting
only
on it.
have 17 likes? Where we do that at? Double tap the face of the screen if you're on your phone, or hit those three dots at the top right corner, okay? Hold on. Y'all tripping. What y'all think y'all doing? I would end this just as quick as I started it. And if you don't know that, cause you just listening with your good good ear, hit the like button, like, share, and subscribe. Get your membership. Hold on, where we at? Did I want to hear? Let's hear about this lawsuit.
You can beat cancer and still lose everything. Or you can have a little known.
And now democracy.
Hold on. What was I looking at over here? Let's hear this.
We're taking a live look right now at the hotel where these peace talks with Iran are set to be held all day today.
Excuse me.
And we do know Vice President J.D. Vance is set to lead those talks here. Bringing you this live image here in full, I do want to share just a little bit more. The Pakistan Ministry of Foreign Affairs announced we're taking a live look right now at the hotel where these peace talks with Iran are set to be held all day today. And we do know Vice President J.D. Vance is set to lead those talks here. Bringing you this live image here in full, I do want to share just a little bit more. The Pakistan Ministry of Foreign Affairs announced the arrival of the U.S. delegation in Islamabad this morning, reaffirming its commitment to facilitating a peace deal. Now, Vice President Vance landed in Pakistan just before 10:30 a.m. local time. He will lead those negotiations with Iran, and he was joined by U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, as well as Jared Kushner, who is President Trump's son-in-law, as part of a senior delegation set to engage in talks with Iran later today. We're also learning that the vice president held a bilateral meeting this morning with Pakistan's prime minister ahead of negotiations with Iran. That was confirmed by the White House, and you're taking a look there at some of that footage from a bit earlier this morning. Now, the foreign ministry said in a statement that it commends the, quote, U.S. commitment to achieving lasting regional and global peace and stability. It added that the deputy prime minister and foreign minister hope all parties will engage constructively. The foreign minister also saying Pakistan will work to facilitate a lasting and durable solution to the conflict. Now, these talks come over a month after the U.S. launched Operation Epic Fury back on February 28th, which was that sweeping military campaign targeting Iran's military infrastructure following the collapse of nuclear negotiations. That operation pushed the U.S. and Iran to the brink of a ground war before a diplomatic breakthrough in just recent days. President Trump announcing that two-week ceasefire earlier this week on Tuesday, agreeing to suspend further U.S. strikes on the condition that Iran reopen the Strait of Hormuz. While Iran signaled it would allow passage through the strait as part of the agreement, traffic remains severely disrupted, with shipping companies hesitant to resume normal operations amid ongoing security concerns and uncertainty over enforcement. Now, Vance struck a cautious tone before departing for these talks, warning Iran not to test the U.S.'s negotiating posture. Let's listen in to just a brief snippet of his agreement. Traffic remains severely disrupted, with shipping companies hesitant to resume normal operations amid ongoing security concerns and uncertainty.
Why is Jared there like he's a part of Trump's cabinet? I don't get that.
Foreign Ministry said in a statement that it commends the, quote, U.S. commitment to achieving lasting regional and global peace and stability. It added that the Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister hope all parties will engage constructively. The Foreign Minister also saying Pakistan will work to facilitate a lasting and durable solution to the conflict. Now, these talks come over a month after the U.S. launched Operation Epic Fury back on February 28th, which was that sweeping military campaign targeting Iran's military infrastructure following the collapse of nuclear negotiations. That operation pushed the U.S. and Iran to the brink of a ground war before a diplomatic breakthrough in just recent days. President Trump announcing that two-week ceasefire earlier this week on Tuesday, agreeing to suspend further U.S. strikes on the condition that Iran reopen the Strait of Hormuz. While Iran signaled it would allow passage through the strait as part of the agreement, traffic remains severely disrupted, with shipping companies hesitant to resume normal operations amid ongoing security concerns and uncertainty over enforcement. Now, Vance struck a cautious tone before departing for these talks, warning Iran not to test the U.S.'s negotiating posture. Let's listen in to just a brief snippet of his comments the other day.
We're looking forward to the negotiation. I think it's going to be positive. We'll, of course, see. As the President of the United States said, if the Iranians are willing to negotiate in good faith, we're certainly willing to extend the open hand. If they're going to try to play us, then they're going to find that the negotiating team is not that receptive. So we're going to try to have a positive negotiation. The President has gave us some pretty clear guidelines, and we're going to see.
President Trump reached a ceasefire deal with Iran on Tuesday, as we mentioned here, saying the U.S. would pause the bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks. He added that the deal is subject to Iran agreeing to the complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz, which is that key waterway in the Middle East that is vital to the global flow of oil. Now, President Trump had shared on Thursday that, quote, Iran is doing a very poor job, dishonorable, some would say, of allowing oil to go through the Strait of Hormuz. He also said there are reports that Iran is charging fees to tankers going through the Hormuz Strait. They better not be, and if they are, they better stop now. We also heard from President Trump.
Oh, because you're not getting the cut.
For just about 2 minutes to the press.
Yeah, you know that.
That, quote, Iran is doing a very poor job, dishonorable, some would say, of allowing oil to go through the Strait of Hormuz. He also said there are reports that Iran
I thought he said it was closed and they was going to have to open. How long have I been telling folk that it's open? It's just closed to Trump, the U.S., and their allies. So why you over here still lying, talking about it's closed? It's closed. No, it's open. It's just closed to you and Bibi Netanyahu.
To tankers going through the Hormuz Strait, they better not be, and if they are, they better stop now. We also
they better stop because you're not getting the cut.
Waterway in the Middle East that is vital to the global flow of oil. Now, President Trump had shared on Thursday that, quote, Iran is doing a very poor job, dishonorable, some would say, of allowing oil to go through the Strait of Hormuz. He also said there are reports that Iran is charging fees to tankers going through the Hormuz Strait.
He said they're making money, and I'm not getting any.
Immediate and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz, which is that key waterway in the Middle East that is vital to the global flow of oil. Now, President Trump had shared on Thursday that, quote, Iran is doing a very poor job, dishonorable, some would say, of allowing oil to go through the Strait of Hormuz. He also said there are reports that Iran is charging fees to tankers going through the Hormuz Strait. They better not be, and if they are, they better stop now. We also heard from President Trump last night. He spoke for just about 2 minutes to the press.
Did you stop Bibi Netanyahu from bombing?
JD Vance before he left, sir.
Well, I wish him luck. He's got a big thing. We'll find out what's going on. They're militarily defeated. And now
Oh,
we're going to
the
open
liar.
up the Gulf.
The liar in
with or
chief.
without him. But that'll be open. We're going to be, or the Strait as they call it. And I think it's going to go pretty quickly. And if it doesn't, we'll be able to finish it off. One way or the other, it's going well. The Navy's gone, the Air Force is gone, all anti-aircraft is gone, the leaders are gone, the whole place is gone. So we'll see how it turns out. So it's JD and Steve and Jared. You have a good team, and they meet tomorrow. We'll see how it all works out.
You're not going to let them toll the Strait, are you? It's international.
No, we're not going to let that. It's international water. If they're doing that, nobody knows if they're doing that. But if they're doing that, we're not going to let that happen.
What would a good deal look like for you?
No nuclear weapon, number one. You know, I think it's already been regime change. But
That
we
wig
never had
about
that
to
as
fall
a-
out. That
as
two
a
piece up
criteria.
there.
No nuclear weapon. That's 99%.
That's you need to get a sew in.
But that'll open up automatically. The answer is yes. But the Strait will open up. If we just left, the Strait's going to, otherwise they make no money.
Baby, because if that
So the
piece
Strait's
fly
gonna
off,
open, but what we have is
I
no
don't know.
nuclear
I'm
weapon, but
going
we'll
to
open the
holler
Strait
and
anyway.
scream
Don't forget,
and
we don't use
laugh
the
for
Strait.
days. I'm
Other
going to tell you
countries use
that
the Strait.
shit now.
So we do have other countries coming up, and they'll help out.
If
but
that
we
piece
don't
blow
use it.
off, it's
It
a
won't
wrap
be
for
easy.
me.
It won't be. I would say this. We will have that open fairly soon.
What's your backup plan?
Excuse?
What's your backup plan if the field opens?
You don't need a backup plan.
No
We
plan B.
The military is defeated. Their military is gone. They have, we've degraded just about everything. They have very few missiles. They have very little manufacturing capability. We've hit them hard. Our military is amazing, the job they've done.
Sorry, sir, is this a one and done talk, or are you open to more talks after this?
I don't know. I can't tell you. I have to see what happens tomorrow. They've been talking for 47 years with other presidents, and we're not doing much talking. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Once again, President Trump speaking to reporters just yesterday, one of those reporters asking President Trump what he said to the vice president before he left for these talks here today. Once again, taking this live look right now out of Pakistan. That is where these talks are expected to be held. This is the hotel. This is set to happen all day. Here's what we're going to do is transition to some other news, but of course, keeping you updated on any new developments with those talks.
Hold on, let me see. Before we go over there, what did I just look at? Hold on. Yeah, please hit the like button. Why are they all saying he's in trouble? What is he saying he's in trouble for?
From yesterday, it was
Happening now, the Trump administration appears undeterred after another leg of the president's revenge tour hit a roadblock. Attorney General Pam Bondi is promising to fight a judge's decision to toss out the criminal cases against former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James.
Both of them, of course, are longtime targets of President Trump's wrath, and the cases against them were brought at his urging. Bondi says the judge won't have the final word. Listen.
We'll be taking all available legal action, including an immediate
Can y'all please hit the like button,
to hold
please?
Letitia James and James Comey accountable for their unlawful conduct.
Just shut up.
I'm going to keep going on this. I'm not worried about someone who has been charged with a very serious crime. His
What about
alleged
his
actions were
34
a betrayal
convictions?
of public trust.
Right
But
now,
that's why
things
your
in
ass is
Washington,
out.
D.C. are pretty wild
Thank
as the
you,
Trump administration seems
Lemonigo.
unfazed, even after hitting yet another bump in the road on the president's revenge tour. Attorney General Pam Bondi is stepping up to contest a judge's decision that tossed out criminal cases against
Is
former
this all
FBI Director
Alex?
James
Why
Comey
you just
and
post
New
this?
York
Because you
Attorney
talking
General
about
Letitia James,
she ain't
both
standing
of
up
whom
and
have
doing
long
nothing
been
right
on the
now. So I
receiving
don't know
end
why you
of
posted
President
this.
Trump's
You must have
anger.
had it and
The cases against
never
them
did
were
nothing with
pushed
it.
by
But hold
him,
on.
after all. Bondi
Yeah,
insists that the judge's
yeah,
ruling
no.
isn't the
Yeah, that's, yeah, you talking crazy. I mean, you not. You just talking late. Let me hear his. Because all of them right now are
For the
saying
router, I don't pay anything
Trump in
for it.
trouble.
The
Trump
installation
in
was super
trouble.
easy. I didn't have to go pick up anything on my own. And pardoning everybody is ridiculous. And I said this about
All about that
I just want
pardon.
to say to everybody watching, make sure you drop
He's
a
trying
like
to
and
do a
subscribe
mass
to both the
pardoning.
Atomokler and the Mike Nellis feed, whether you're
I'm
watching on Substack. Every paid subscription helps us build a stronger independent media system. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can help us
Yeah, he's
break
trying to do a
records in
mass
independent media by
pardoning.
subscribing and dropping a like below.
I'll
Then
come
we're
back
going to
later
talk
for
about the
that.
Eric
I'm
Swalwell
finna go into
allegations because
here in the
accountability
courts.
isn't
Oh man, I didn't mean to X that out like that. I had this up here. Do I want to hear this first or listen to the over argument? Let's listen to this.
And so to talk a lot more about what we're seeing here and how this is all unfolding, I'd like
Trump
to bring into the
back in the
conversation
corner,
legal
yep.
analyst Nima
And he,
Rahmani.
and
Nima,
that
thanks so much
hand,
for being with us
guess
here on
what,
Live Now.
Luminegro, and them hands ain't good, you know. Yeah, he backed in the corner and he can't fight his way out, cause them hands ain't good. Thank you, Larry. Larry, I have not went to sleep. Can you believe that? Yeah, them hands ain't no good, a little Negro. You know, that's why he got them patches and fake paint and Cody makeup, Maybelline all on his hands, cause his forehands ain't no good. So it ain't no fun to be backed in the corner and you can't get out. Yeah, he can't get out. It's about to get, and listen, he's sending Vance over there. JD Vance is trying to get his position so he can run for vice president. But he over there playing with grown men. Season. You know, it ain't nothing like sending the kid to play with some season. You know exactly what they doing. And Jared Kushner, you know, he think he's smarter than everybody. He one of them legions, one of them reptilians. Yeah, they think they smart, but I'm tell you, them folk over there ain't playing with them. They ain't playing with him. Okay, let's go here. Let's listen to this before we listen to the arguments. I just want to hear what this guy is saying.
And so to talk a lot more about what we're seeing here and how this is all unfolding, I'd like to bring into the conversation legal analyst Nima Rahmani. Nima, thanks so much for being with us here on Live Now from Fox. We've talked about
and
this.
Y'all know Diddy and what's her name? Melania and Ghislaine Maxwell and all of them was, you know, I can't wait for that Florida. They don't ever want that Palm Beach or Miami federal charges for playing with them kids, cause we ain't gonna act like Diddy and Jay-Z wasn't having their own little auction parties, just like Trump. Yeah. It's all full circle, baby. Let's go.
At length. We talked about this from the inception when Diddy got arrested, then that ensuing trial that happened, all culminating into his conviction eventually last July. But you predicted this. There was going to be an appeal. We're now at that point. What are Diddy's lawyers now trying to argue in court?
Thanks, Christina. I did predict the guilty verdict, the specific counts, and the acquitted counts, as well as the sentence. So I'll stick my neck out and probably make a prediction on this appeal as well. So I'll start with the arguments that the defense is making, and they're going to make, and they have made, two sets of arguments that were raised both in the written briefs and during oral argument before the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. And the first set of arguments attacks the conviction itself. And if you recall, Combs was just convicted of violating the Mann Act. That's essentially prostitution across state lines under federal law. He was acquitted of the more serious sex trafficking and racketeering, or RICO, counts. And the defense made two arguments attacking those prostitution convictions. And the first argument is that because Diddy did not actually participate in the sex acts, he watched his partners perform sexual acts with male escorts, that he can't be convicted of prostitution as a matter of law because he wasn't having sex with the sex workers.
Oh, wow.
Well, I think that argument will likely fail because the law is pretty clear. You don't have to actually participate in the sex acts as long as you aid and abet or facilitate them. The second argument, a little bit more creative, is that because Combs was filming those sexual encounters, that it wasn't prostitution at all, that it was homemade pornography protected by the First Amendment. Again, I don't think that's going to fly with this set of judges. Now, setting aside the arguments that attack the conviction,
I'm going to say this, well, what's going on right now with the Epstein files that wasn't being released when this was going on, and people was thinking it was so far-fetched with Diddy. Ain't none of it far-fetched. None of it. And right now, should none of these sex, however they dice it up and play it up, none of it should work. In fact, he should have more time. Because the reality of it is, we all know that he was involved in more than just carrying prostitutes across the line. We know this. Yeah, and believe you me, he is involved with child Trump age is 12, 13, 14. Sometimes there has occasions been younger than that. And Diddy like boys at 15, 16, however old Usher was, and however old what's his name, Bieber was. He like him like that. Break him off into the industry. But that's when you get to Florida. Yeah, on them islands, them parties. Yeah. Diddy was recruited by Trump. I done showed y'all that interview. Okay. It's just a matter of time. And what? Epstein done pop back up. Pistol Pete. What is it? Palm Beach Pete. Same tattoo on his arm. He done got a little face face work done. Added a dimple, cut off his mustache and beard and stuff. And had a Clark Gable dimple put in his chin and shit. Yeah, I think Melania done got freaked out. She gonna tell on herself, well, it wasn't me, and I never ucked him, and I didn't meet him through Epstein, and everything that you finna hear is a lie, and these pictures that you're gonna see is what, girl, please. I just played in the other live. I done played you, and you had on some futuristic see-through shit. Girl, you was just, what type of hoe shit? I just ain't never known in all my life for us to have a president's wife, first lady, that's acting all hoe is she. Now, I know you don't redeem yourself. You don't, I guess you don't swing like that no more. I don't know. But girl, your see-through game was woo. Your ass out game was woo. What? You know, normally first ladies is all refined and, you know the spoons and forks to use and have it all lined up and speak with proper dialect and all, what's her name? Onassis, I mean, let me show my, baby, I mean, ass all out. I was looking for your ass to twerk. I'm like, what the f is this? I mean, I knew you was freakish because I know that you dated Epstein first. So that's why I never dated him. Hi, Sylvia. Let me find it. Yeah, I showed it earlier. I said, look at this freak. I mean, I had that picture with old boy hand down your butt. And, I don't want to just put you out there just yet. But girlfriend, as my mama would say, girlfriend. Yeah, look at old Jeffrey at Palm Beach.
That President Trump and his administration during
his
first term.
He don't went got his face
now have beyond a shadow of a doubt absolute confirmation.
All them
President
friends.
Trump and his administration during his first term staged and faked the death of Jeffrey Epstein so they could clear all of his charges. The man had a little cosmetic surgery. He goes by the name of Palm Beach Pete, according to this photo, which was taken of him driving.
Look at his arm. There go that tattoo.
Luxury car in Palm Beach, and he has the same tattoo as Jeffrey Epstein.
He said, I'm bad.
So what are the odds that the literally man that everybody in the world was calling Jeffrey Epstein and saying looks just like Jeffrey Epstein, just magically lives in the same state as Epstein, used to have a palace in, and then just happens to go by the name of Palm Beach Pete? Everybody knows Palm Beach Pete, right? Well, we now have, beyond a shadow of a doubt, absolute confirmation that President Trump and his administration during his first term staged and faked the death of Jeffrey Epstein so they could clear all of his charges. The man had a little cosmetic surgery. He goes by the name of Palm Beach Pete, according to this photo, which was taken of him driving his, luxury car in Palm Beach, and he has the same tattoo as Jeffrey Epstein. So what are the odds that the literally man that everybody in the world was calling Jeffrey Epstein and saying looks just like Jeffrey Epstein, just magically lives in the same state as Epstein, used to have a palace in, and then just happens to go by the name of Palm Beach Pete? Everybody knows Palm Beach Pete, right? Well, we now have, beyond a shadow of a doubt, absolute
Michael Wolff
that President Trump and his administration during his first term staged and faked the death of Jeffrey Epstein so they could clear all of his charges.
I think at first I was saying he was
he goes by the name of Palm Beach Pete, according to
clues
this photo,
from the grave. He don't rose from the dead, baby.
Luxury
he driving down the street. And he was in hold on. First he
excessive. And it's excessive
he
for a
was
couple
in
reasons.
Israel. We saw them clippers 2 months ago? It came out. He was in Israel. They started bombing. Then we see him driving down the street, sipping on gin and juice. Yeah. Lay back. And then y'all remember last weekend, he didn't even want to go. He didn't want to go to Mar-a-Lago. He didn't go. He didn't go to home. Well, who you hiding from? You scared you scared you're gonna run into Pistol Pete or Palm Beach Pete? Now you need fiberglass bulletproof around the White House. You need a fence put all up. I'm like, you scared? What you scared for? You scared that you're gonna run into the ghost of Epstein. That's what you're scared of. Yeah, you scared. You would have to go to the hospital. They scared the shit out you. and you had to go to the hospital. Now you need a hospital up under the White House. Ain't nobody else had to have no whole hospital up under the White House. You want to go up in that bunker and you going to barricade yourself. You scared as hell. You done played with all these people's lives. Yeah. And in Palm Beach, Pete done popped out. And y'all scared. And then Melania, yeah, with her, let me get her freaky deaky ass before I get, and I'm bringing this up with Diddy because they all friends. They all was friends. Where Melania, where you at, girl? You just baby, you a special kind of a first lady. First, I almost said the H-O word, W-H-O. You the first, I mean, I ain't saying the rest of them wasn't freaky. But baby, you a piece of work. Is this one it? Yeah. Look at our first lady. Our first house. I mean, what is she? What would y'all call this? Is this a first lady to y'all? Or is she a pinup? Is she a pinup lady? I mean, what is this? This is y'all first lady. I mean, huh? Baby, let me tell y'all something. If Michelle Obama, she can't even just be a classy, a black, you know, kind of, she ain't over the top. You know, she's refined, but she just ain't, she couldn't have on no shit like this. President Obama had on a tan suit and they lost their mind. First house. Yeah, you know, yeah. How do you know? Cause you tell you so. You know. Yeah. For 50 damn niggas. I mean, you know, I don't know how to sound. But look at that, y'all. Look at that. If this was Michelle Obama, can you imagine that? Can you imagine this being Michelle Obama? I don't know if one of her nips gonna pop out, so I just want to kind of keep it. Y'all look at that. Look at that. And the next one, I don't even know. Let me see if I can catch this next one. Joe ho-ish. This one. And you wasn't even no runway model. First later. First what? What's that surprise say? First. Look how she looking at. She looking at the skank. I'm gonna let it down a little bit. I want folk to see Auntie Fee ain't just tripping. And I ain't hating on you. I ain't hating. I ain't hating. Look at you out in the. See, is this when you gave it up in the helicopter, in the jet? He said he tapped that he tapped that test on Lolita. Was that the name of the plane? Yeah. Is that the cockpit? You giving it up in the cockpit? Girl, look at that. This y'all first lady. And y'all be having the nerve to call somebody trashy or, you know, whatever y'all be trying to call somebody. Yeah. And you want us to think that you wasn't involved in none of that type stuff. Girl, please. Girl, please. Look at you. 007. What color was that plane, Lolita's plane? Did it have them yellow and gold stripes on it? Look at her, 007. Just as freaky as she want to be. Look. Huh? Ass all out. You just stop. You know y'all. Yeah, look at you. And I think that it is, what she say, it mean-hearted. No, girl, you didn't think none of this was going to come back to you. But if it would have been Michelle Obama, y'all have had everything to say about it. Oh, my light is going, okay, y'all better be glad, boo-boo. Now let's get on back over here, because when it's all said and done and Pistol Pete pop his ass out. Jesus black? Absolutely. Why I keep, is Jesus black? Absolutely. I got so much stuff going on, Lord. Pistol Pete. Pistol Pete. This is why they scared. Pistol Pete is driving and, you know, hunting them. I mean, spiritually hunting them, knowing good and damn well they don't need no Jeffrey Epstein to pop out with all of their corruption, because y'all said that he was unalive on Trump's watch. How you gonna explain that? Bill Barr? Yeah, Bill Barr worked for you. So who did y'all carry out? Yeah, all y'all lies. Y'all lies, none of it. None of it. So I know it's freaking y'all out. Y'all sick. Y'all be in court. Y'all stay in court. Y'all don't want us to know. Y'all controlling the media. Y'all don't want nobody to know. Y'all asses stay in court every day. Yeah. Melania, you been losing. You trying to get it back to Florida. You better stay from Florida. Oh boy popped out on purpose. They taunting y'all for real. Because the information that Michael Wolff has that's gonna beat y'all up in court is coming from Palm Beach Pete, aka Jeffrey Epstein. Surprise. Surprise. In my Axa Foley's voice. Yeah. We're back. Yeah, you thought that he was going to stay in Israel, where Israel got bombed, and that's because of Bibi Netanyahu. So he had to come out of hiding. But he had started showing himself anyway. So he was beard long, eyebrows thick, hair all down his back and shit. He just took all that off. Yeah. It's somewhere, one of them pictures after he first showed himself, it looked like he was in the doctor's office where he done got his face tampered with. Yeah. Yeah. Stay woke, y'all. It's finna get funny. Yeah. And they from the same circle. Let me show y'all before I forget. This right here, I gotta trim it up so y'all can see. But Melania and Diddy, those are pictures, two separate pictures. One when he was in the white and then when she was in the burgundy. Both of them are including Diddy. With the Trumps. Melania as well. Baby, y'all days are numbered. Let's go.
First, and probably the best argument they have, is a set of judges. Now, setting aside the arguments that attack the convictions, they're also attacking the sentence, saying that that 15-month sentence, more than 4 years, is excessive. And it's excessive for a couple reasons. First, and probably the best argument they have, is that the judge improperly considered acquitted conduct. Now, that's something where the law is really in flux. There's an older 30-year-old Supreme Court case, United States versus Watts, where the Supreme Court says that judges can consider acquitted conduct, even at sentencing. But recently in the federal sentencing guidelines, the Sentencing Commission got together and said, you know what, judges should not consider acquitted conduct. You got one that's more revealing? I do think that is the best argument the defense has in this case, that Combs is being punished for conduct, the violence, the drugs, the bribery, the extortion, the arson, that the jury found him not guilty on. And I wouldn't be surprised if either this Circuit Court of Appeals or even the United States Supreme Court ends up reversing the sentence, but not the underlying conviction itself.
This is fascinating to understand how you can take the law to see where it goes ultimately in this case. And I hadn't thought about the fact that because Diddy wasn't necessarily participating in those acts, filming them, that could even be a component of this entire case. And so, Nima, of course, the prosecutors, you touched lightly on what they were going to be looking for and trying to push back on.
I thought he participated in that one guy.
Process?
Well, the prosecution obviously took a different approach. They
Y'all be forgetting he got down one a time or two.
And that the sentence was within the guideline range and really the maximum for each potential count. Now, we're talking about the Mann Act, which is a potential 10-year sentence, and Combs was obviously convicted of multiple Mann Act accounts. But really, Christina, the reality is that really no one in America is prosecuted at the federal level for simple prostitution alone without force, fraud, or coercion. That would, of course, make it trafficking. And that anyone who is prosecuted for the Mann Act or simple prostitution along with some other crime really is not getting multiple years in federal prison. So the defense argument is that, look, if you believe in the jury system and verdict means to speak the truth, the jury has spoken. Really, Combs should be a free man by now because he's being punished for this other conduct. Obviously, we've all seen the video of him beating Cassie Ventura on video. He wasn't charged for that. That was outside the statute of limitations under California state law here in Los Angeles. Where
he has a pattern.
That you're really punishing him for this conduct that the jury found to be
he has a history,
and you're really backdooring that in, and it's really unfair and unjust. And
no, it's not, little white boy. What's your name? I don't know your name, because he was threatening the suspects from a jail. He has a pattern. He needs to sit down, and they need to come on with Florida and hit him with the charges with these minors. Yeah, because he trying to get out. And then once he get out, he going to be way over there. He know these people are surfacing. Yeah, he know that they brewing. Florida has not been, he's not been charged of anything in Florida yet. That's why they fired Comey. Yeah. Daughter.
Some legs, and I wouldn't be surprised if one or more of these appellate judges do think that a reduction in the sentence is warranted.
I'm glad that you mentioned that as well, because really the celebrity of Diddy, I mean, he was, before he went to prison at least, was a billionaire, considered to be one of the top people within the hip hop industry and entertainment industry at large. So many different people knew him by his many names that he had over the years. So it's hard to separate the celebrity from the man who was there in court as we were watching all of that unfold. And so, Nima, you've been walking us through this process. Can you sort of explain here, how does an appeal really differ from what's originally argued in court? Are there different things that you can bring into that conversation that might make change things ultimately, and why we might see some of these appeals get overturned throughout the course of history?
Well, Christina, obviously in appeal, there's no jury, and you can only raise arguments that you raised in the trial court. You have to preserve the record, unless there's a clear error. But these arguments were raised by Diddy's team when they were both during the trial, after the trial, and during the sentencing hearing. So now, this is how the process works. There is a 3-judge panel that has heard this appeal. They will issue a written decision, usually in a matter of months. So I would expect to get it sometime this summer. Now, depending on what that decision is, this could go in a number of ways. In the unlikely event that they find the underlying conviction is invalid, they will vacate that conviction, which means that they'll reverse it, and they'll send the case back down to the trial court for a retrial. I can tell you that I don't think the Department of Justice will retry this case just to try the Mann Act or prostitution counts alone. I don't think it's a good use of government resources, and given the amount of time that Combs has been in, he's likely going to get something close to time served. Then the question is, well, what will happen if they send the case back down for a resentencing? I think that's more likely. In that case, the underlying conviction will remain unless Combs is able to get a presidential pardon. We know his team has been angling for that, and President Trump has been pretty liberal when it comes out to handing pardons, especially when it comes to some famous rappers. So that's always going to be a possibility. But I think that's the most likely outcome, where Combs will get a new sentence, but he will still be a convicted felon. Now, if that Court of Appeals rejects the defense arguments, it's still not over yet. They can petition for hearing en banc. That means for the entire Second Circuit, all the judges to rehear the case. And of course, after that, there's always the possibility of a Supreme Court petition. Now, normally, the Supreme Court, they don't accept many petitions, a very small percentage. But again, I think this case is unique because of the high-profile nature of it, but also because the law is unsettled. And even some of the conservative justices, I'm talking about Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, Barrett, they've come on record in other cases saying, you know what, I don't think it's necessarily fair under the Fifth and Sixth Amendments of the Constitution for someone to be sentenced for conduct which a jury acquits them on. So this might be the type of case that obviously has gotten a lot of attention, but even in the legal community may ultimately change the law on this important issue.
Literally, that was going to be my next question, is how do folks in the legal community view this case? Do they think that this could be a bellwether? Also, we mentioned the fact that it has so much attention. It might be the thing that folks at home are also paying attention to when it comes to changing the law and going all the way up to Supreme Court.
No question. Obviously, this is a very polarizing case, and some people can't get out of their mind the horrific video of Combs beating Cassie Ventura, and they think that he's a predator, and he's gotten away with it because he is a rich and famous celebrity. So there are people that have very strong views on that side, but there are also people that think that he's being railroaded because he's a celebrity, and that adults can consent to anything that they want, no matter how freaky it is. And certainly, I could tell you that the defense attorneys that are watching think it's unfair for someone to be acquitted but still be sentenced for that conduct. So there's very strong views on both sides when it comes to this case, and this might be the type of case that law students years down the road will be talking about United States versus Combs when they're citing their sentencing papers and other cases.
They'll definitely be interesting to see in the books. If it
I need for y'all to hit the like button.
So, Reva, lastly, before I let you go, I want to ask you about some of the civil ramifications of all of this. We know that there was the criminal trial. Then usually we see these things trickle in. Obviously, some of them had already begun before. People suing Diddy on a civil matter. What do you take and look at how his conviction criminally could affect some of those cases?
Well, certainly is going to embolden Diddy and the defense, but I don't necessarily think he's out of the woods yet. And like you said, there's approximately 60 civil lawsuits that have been filed. I think the civil lawsuits actually have a much better chance of success for a couple of reasons. And probably the most famous case, of course, is O.J. Simpson, who was acquitted of murder charges but found liable in the wrongful death suit that was filed by the Goldman family. Actually, my former boss, Dan Petrocelli at O'Melveny & Myers, handled that case. So the reason I think the civil lawsuits have a better chance of success, Christina, is this. One, obviously it's a lower standard, just preponderance of the evidence, not beyond a reasonable doubt. But I also think there's a ready-made argument in those cases that was not presented in the criminal case. And this is why. I think the biggest problem with the criminal prosecution was this. And this was something that I took issue with the DOJ and how they prosecuted the case. And I understand the psychology of abuse and why a victim of physical or sexual violence may stay with the abuser. But the problem with the criminal prosecution is that the Department of Justice primarily relied on 3 witnesses, including Cassie and 2 others, who were either girlfriends or were in a professional, long-term relationship with
He was
Combs.
pimping
and the
them.
jurors were probably asking themselves, well, if you're a victim
They
of
couldn't
abuse,
say no.
why did you stay? And again, I certainly understand why a victim may stay. They may be afraid. They may be financially dependent on the person. But we've seen it time and time again in these types of abuse cases. We saw it in the Harvey Weinstein case, for instance, where the jury only convicted on 1 of the 3 victims who presented because those victims maintained contact with their abuser. Again, I'm not saying that that argument is necessarily going to win every time, but it's an argument that the defense had in the criminal case. I think in the civil cases, the reason it's going to be different is many of the accusers. They weren't in those long-term relationships with Combs. One of the first times, or the only times that they interact with him, they allege that they were sexually abused or assaulted. So I think that gets rid of the defense that Combs' attorneys, Mark Ignifilo, and others were able to successfully raise in the criminal case. And I think
his
those
case
civil
ain't
lawsuits
came.
have a greater chance of
I
success.
think he is in Florida.
Well, there's so much still to unpack, as we thought maybe that things were coming to a close after that conviction day. But again, you said that an appeal was likely on the way. We're in that process now.
They couldn't say no.
We'll see
He
if
beat
it
him.
takes us all the way to the Supreme Court.
Yes, they
Still
did.
so much to unpack, but we certainly
Yes, they said no.
joining us here on Live Now to break down the
J-Dog, we don't lie over here. Don't come over here lying. They did say no. And that came out in court. So they didn't say no all the time, but they did say no. And that one time they said no, he beat the fuck out of her. So get your ass up out of here. Get out. Get your ass up out of here. Get your lying ass. She tried to get out. She tried to leave. He told her no. And then he dragged her. The hell is wrong with you? I know you know better. That means that you take coochie. You sitting over here justifying that. No, you're a lie. She was trying to leave. What does that mean? I don't want to do this. I'm ready to go. And he said no. He beat and dragged her.
Hey, this is really hard for me to do.
Oh my God, you guys come.
Oh, Tisa, I'm gonna come back to her too. Hold on. So them two. Let me see. Now we're gonna go into the listening to the oral argument.
You must be
With that, Mr. Pirel.
Wait, court started?
May it please
I'm
the
sorry.
court. Who represented him at trial.
This presents an important issue about respect for jury verdicts and public confidence in our criminal justice system. Multiple justices have questioned the constitutionality of acquitted conduct sentencing.
Can y'all hear?
Clinton made clear.
Well, actually,
No, I can't.
I'm going to jump in right there, and I appreciate that you're leading with.
Can y'all give me a one if y'all can hear?
Are often not viewed as co-conspirators. There's an old case, I'm forgetting the name of
No,
it.
the question isn't co-conspirators, whether they're criminally responsible.
Well, it's this, I mean, for the.
Not the same.
The Supreme Court cases, and I apologize that I can't remember the name of it, would only consider someone to be criminally responsible if they were involved in arranging the transport or something like that, but not necessarily the person
Right,
who
I recall
traveled.
those cases.
So
Okay,
I
so that would be your argument as to why the two escorts are out, or an argument why the two escorts are out. And what about the two named victims in this case, who the
Can y'all hear me? Can y'all hear that?
They had participated in the arrangement of
Well,
transportation.
the government never took the position that they were co-conspirators. The
I'm
government.
not talking about co-conspirators. I'm talking about whether they're criminally responsible under the guidelines.
Well, it's the same, for all practical purposes, the same thing.
Really?
Yes. Yes, I think it is, clearly.
If I cause someone to commit a crime, the person who commits the crime is guilty as a principal, and the person who caused the person to commit the crime is guilty as a principal. But that is a conceptually different concept from conspiracy, correct?
Yes.
Section 2 conspiracy, Section 2, 18 U.S.C. Section 2 is not the same as Section 371.
Right. If I may, Your Honor, the district court didn't rely on those others. This court has to review the district court's specific findings. The conspiracy that Mr. Combs was acquitted of clearly required the jury to find it that he acted with other people. The government argued that he led the conspiracy to the jury, and the jury was also told that if they found any two racketeering acts, even of the same type, and that he participated with someone else, that was sufficient, and yet the jury acquitted. So.
Wait a minute. that would be sufficient to find RICO? If you find that two people agree,
it wasn't a RICO charge, it was a RICO conspiracy charge.
But it's not, you're not guilty of RICO conspiracy if two people agree to commit a predicate.
That's not what I said.
Right. And that's not what the district court instructed the jury, right?
The instructions, the only disputed elements were whether there was an agreement with at least one other co-conspirator, whether Mr. Combs knowingly joined the agreement.
Agreement to blank. Agreement to what?
Agreement to participate in the conduct of a racketeering enterprise.
Right, so one could agree to participate in a predicate act without agreeing to participate in the affairs of a racketeering enterprise, right?
The jury also necessarily, on the facts of this case and the way it was argued to the jury, there's no way that the jury wouldn't have concluded that there was a racketeering enterprise if they concluded that Mr. Combs committed these crimes.
Now you seem to be going into Sixth Amendment collateral estoppel areas, though, right?
No, I think what the court has to look at is what the jury necessarily determined in determining what the acquitted conduct
That's a collateral estoppel argument under Cole. I mean, there is this thing that we say acquittals don't constitute factual findings of anything, right? They are determinations that somewhere within the elements of an offense, the jury found something not proven beyond a reasonable doubt, but they didn't make an affirmative finding that anything else.
No.
Now, we do find sometimes in Cole, for example, that for collateral estoppel purposes under double jeopardy, the jury must have concluded something or another. And that seems like where you're going here.
Well, Your Honor, the commission wrote this guideline for a reason, right? And it requires courts to figure out what the acquitted conduct is. And the simplest and clearest way to do that is to look at what elements the government was required to prove for the counts of acquittal and the counts of conviction. And so if the jury, in this case, what we have, let's take the sex trafficking counts. The only disputed issue was whether there was coercion or threats or fraud. And that was one element. The government's case focused on that issue, its arguments focused on that issue, its evidence focused on that issue, and the jury clearly rejected that argument. So we know.
So doesn't the coercion as to the two pieces of evidence that the government relied upon of sentencing, right, which is the threat to one threat to Ventura, one threat to Jane. I think one was to release the tape, the other was we're going to I'm not going to pay your rent. Doesn't that establish the intent of the Mann Act? That is the intent to violate the Mann Act. That's what the district judge used this evidence for. He says that it overlaps to this extent. That is, the RICO conspiracy overlaps with the Mann Act, and insofar as we're talking about intent here. And why don't those two pieces of evidence support his factual finding and that there's intent for purposes of the Mann Act?
No, Your Honor, for two reasons. First of all, the intent element and the coercion elements are, as the government said, totally separate. And under our view of the acquitted conduct guideline, you have to look at it by element, and this type of analysis shows why the relevance test is problematic. But I want to also...
I understand your point about the relevancy test, but isn't that just nomenclature? We look at substance, not at labels.
I don't think it's nomenclature, because this is a relevant conduct guideline. The whole point of the guideline is to take acquitted conduct out of relevant conduct, and a relevance test really is another way of saying, well, acquitted conduct is not relevant unless it's relevant, which makes no sense. But I do want to talk about the specific incidents and why that's not correct.
Okay.
So first of all, with respect to the Cann incident, there's actually no evidence that there even was a Mann Act offense in connection with the Cann trip. So the government's argument is that threats were supposedly made on an airplane flight returning from Cannes to New York. Under Broxmire, United States against Broxmire, 616 F3rd 120 at 127, a 2010 case from this court. The court held that for purposes of the Mann Act, the intent to engage in prostitution, which has to be a dominant purpose of the travel, has to coincide in time. And there's no evidence that even on the airplane, they were planning a so-called freak-off, and moreover, there was no evidence in the record that there was a freak-off other than Ms. Ventura's testimony.
Wait a minute, pause. You just said there was no evidence other than a witness's testimony, which is another way of saying there was trial evidence.
Right.
The jury is the finder of facts.
So this, not only was this argued to the jury in the summation, but the jury sent back a note asking for, quote, Cassandra Ventura testimony regarding Ken and the events immediately following. That's at trial transcript page 8085, which is at docket 632 in the district court. And you know that the jury rejected the notion that that there was coercion in connection with that incident. With respect to the Mann Act,
now you're mixing two things. Let's grant you the notion that they decided coercion had not been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. But I thought you were just arguing a different thing, that the defendant did not have an intent for purposes of the Mann Act transportation, during the conflict? Because then you were saying there was no evidence that a freak-off even happened. Now, we're sort of venturing down beyond whether the jury found coercion to now say, yes, because you could say the jury found, yes, these events happened, but they weren't coerced. That's fine. But now you're saying they also found that none of this even happened. And I don't see how that follows.
That's not what I said.
It's not.
You said there was no evidence that the freak-off happened except for Ventura's testimony, and then you were trying to argue the jury necessarily rejected Ventura's testimony. And I guess you're saying because they rejected the argument of the government.
The purpose of the travel has to coincide in time, and there's no evidence that even on the airplane they were planning a so-called freak-off, and moreover, there was no evidence in the record that there was a freak-off other than Ms. Ventura's testimony.
Wait a minute, pause. You just said there was no evidence other than a witness's testimony, which is another way of saying there was trial evidence.
Right.
The jury is the finder of facts.
So this, not only was this argued to the jury in the summation, but the jury sent back a note asking for, quote, Cassandra Ventura testimony regarding Ken and the events immediately following. That's at trial transcript page 8085, which is at docket 632 in the district court. And you know that the jury rejected the notion that that there was coercion in connection with that incident. With respect to the Mann Act,
you're mixing two things. Let's grant you the notion that they decided coercion had not been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. But I thought you were just arguing a different thing, that the defendant did not have an intent for purposes of the Mann Act transportation, during the conflict? Because then you were saying there was no evidence that a freak-off even happened. Now, we're sort of venturing down beyond whether the jury found coercion to now say, yes, because you could say the jury found, yes, these events happened, but they weren't coerced. That's fine. But now you're saying they also found that none of this even happened. And I don't see how that follows.
That's not what I said.
Well, you said there was no evidence that the freak-off happened except for Ventura's testimony, and then you were trying to argue the jury necessarily rejected Ventura's testimony. And I guess you're saying because they rejected the argument of the government that her testimony showed there was coercion, they must have rejected every single thing that Ventura said.
That's not what I said.
Well, that was the implication, so let's back up.
That's not what I meant to imply. The point is that the government relied for its the Mann Act. The whole Mann Act charges were basically an afterthought at this trial. They took up almost no time. The government relied principally on these two charts. And if you look at Government Exhibit 1402...
I understand that, and you made that point very well in your brief. So isn't your argument really that what the government is doing here is mixing and matching? They're taking evidence from the claims that were acquitted to try to support the Mann Act sentencing for purposes of the Mann Act, but none of that jury was presented to the jury for purposes of the Mann Act.
Yes,
is that a summation of what we're...
That's fair. And I think our view of the sentencing guideline as we've briefed is that The way it should be interpreted, and I think this is very simple and straightforward, is that acquitted conduct can only be used when it is also convicted conduct. And if I may, I can point to some hypothetical examples.
Before we do that, let me just focus on the Mann Act for 1 second, and I hope it will inform this discussion. So the Mann Act is indicted to say that the transport was of either, as to count 3, Ventura or the escorts, and as to count 5, Jane Doe or the escorts. But at trial, the government's theory
Please hit
was
the like
that
button.
count 3 is violated and count 5 is violated by transportation of escorts to engage with Ventura and Doe, right? So it's not Ventura and Doe that are transported for those convictions, isn't that right? Or because that's what the government's closing argument is talking about, transporting the escorts.
Yes.
Well, mostly. So is it do you believe that either the transportation of Ventura or Doe or the transport of the escorts could be the basis of the jury's conviction on 3 and 5?
I think it was that if you look at the charts, the focus is on the escorts for sure.
Well, I was looking at the closing arguments.
Yeah.
The government's closing argument.
I think that's right.
So if the theory advanced at trial is that the escorts are the ones being transported, but we're referring to count 3 as the Ventura count and count 5 as the Jane Doe count because that's the person who was involved when the escort arrived, then how do we now, in light of that, how would we consider things like the con trip?
Well, then I would say that it doesn't count, but I think what I was getting at, and I don't think I was very clear, so if I may, I'd like to explain it a little better. The con trip, they were in con and then they flew back to the United States. They were flying home. So the purpose of the trip, even if a freak-off did happen, wasn't to engage in prostitution, it was to come home. And under Miller and Broxmeyer and the jury instructions in this case, a dominant purpose of the trip has to be to engage in prostitution.
So can I ask you though, I hadn't understood the government's argument to be that the purpose of flying home from con was to engage in the activity. I thought it was the fact that he went, according to the one witness, on the plane, sat next to her, showed her the video.
Oh yeah, that was another one.
And then immediately turned around and arranged for the escort to travel to the hotel where then the activity happened, was evidence that this is that the thing that happened at the hotel is in fact what he intended to happen, as opposed to his argument that no, I wanted people to travel so that I could have an attractive scene, but if there was actual sexual activity that followed, that was just something that happened. But by showing a video of people engaged in such activity in close proximity to the event that actually transpired with the activity, it showed that his purpose in making this whole arrangement was to have the activity occur, and that manifested his intent.
But that's not sufficient to establish a Mann Act violation. The purpose of the travel has
Well, it's not sufficient, but it certainly contributes to it, because you have to have intent, right? So I could arrange for the intent of anyone to cross state lines, and then various activities could happen. But it's not a Mann Act violation unless I transport them with the intent that those events transpire, right?
That's my point.
So that's what I'm saying is, why does this not go to prove his intent, which is an element of a Mann Act violation, that the reason he had the people, the escorts, travel across state lines was so the activity would happen?
I think that gets back to the point I was making earlier, that under our view of the acquitted conduct guideline, that is just too far afield, and it's basically like a relevance test. You're saying
how do you prove his intent then? So what evidence, are you saying that some evidence of his intent does count as offense conduct and some does not?
Well, first of all, if you actually look at her testimony, I don't think she testifies to what Your Honor just articulated. And in fact, the testimony establishes that they got to New York and then they had dinner and then he suggested a freak-off after that.
Well, right. This is a question for the jury to infer about whether the temporal proximity between him showing a video to her on the plane and then immediately getting back to New York and suggesting it and having it play out is why he wanted the escort to be traveling.
But there's no basis
Sierra
from which
Diddy
to
got off
conclude the jury
easy.
even
He was
found that
never
this
charged
particular
with the
incident
more serious
constituted a
crimes. All
Mann
right,
Act.
right, and Sierra, some of those serious charges are in Florida, not in New York.
The Mann Act,
When it
the
came down
government's
to the kids and all
discussion
of
of the Mann
those
Act in its
all
closing
white
argument,
parties and
was
any and
focused
everything
on
goes,
this
that was in
charge.
Florida. He
you
has
have to have
not
an
been
opinion
hit with
here.
that yet.
And let's just step out of the weeds, and we have to enunciate a principle, right? And the guidelines, the discussion of the guidelines talks about line drawing exercises that courts have to engage in to determine where there's overlap, where acquitted and convicted conduct overlap. Can you articulate a principle that
they want us to forget about
for us
that?
To apply, if you were writing the opinion, what principle would you enunciate that is, readily administrable by courts to engage in this line drawing exercise? Can you give me a bright line test of some sort?
Yeah, let me try. If I may, I'll try to illustrate it with some hypotheticals. So I think the test should be, and what the commission intended the test to be, that courts cannot use acquitted conduct for guidelines purposes unless the defendant was also convicted of that conduct. And in order to determine what that means, you would look at whether the same element that has to be proven in connection with acquitted conduct has to be proven in connection with elements convicted conduct. So, for example, let's suppose you have a case in which a defendant is charged with drug conspiracy to distribute narcotics, as well as several substantive counts of distribution. And the defendant is convicted of the conspiracy and, with respect to the substantive counts, is acquitted of some and convicted on others. When determining the drug amount, the court could not count the ones the defendant was, the weight from the ones the defendant was acquitted of for the
a lot more
substantive counts,
people
but
should
could count
have
the
been
ones
arrested
the defendant was
too,
convicted
but we're
of, as
giving
well
them
as any
immunity.
other drug deals that were either proven at trial or are proven at sentencing if they're not charged in separate substantive counts. That's one example. Another one would be you could have a fraud case in which the defendant is charged in securities fraud as well as wire fraud, and it's the same exact scheme to defraud, the same false representations in both counts, but the defendant is acquitted of one and convicted on the other. The way to make sense of that is to say it's clear the defendant has been convicted of the scheme to defraud, and so you could count the entire loss amount, even though he was, let's say, acquitted of wire fraud, either because maybe the jury didn't find the wire in furtherance or something like that, but it's clear that they did find the scheme to defraud proven because the same conduct underlies the element in both charges.
To what extent does your theory rely upon what the government argues in terms of the evidence? In other words, the case that's presented to the jury in terms of the elements. Is that dependent upon that, or does that matter? Is that irrelevant?
I think it depends on the case. I think you have to look at the indictment and what's the charge and what's the government's theory of the case. So,
the theory of the case as presented to the jury, right? It's not their theory of the case in the abstract, what may be in the indictment, but it's what is actually. They have a case to prove, right? So wouldn't it be the evidence and the arguments that the government makes to the jury?
It's definitely very important, and I think that's why. That's why we think that the test that's used for collateral estoppel is.
And so, was any of the evidence and the arguments the government made here in connection with the RICO and sex trafficking offenses, was any of that evidence presented to the jury for purposes of persuading them?
Please hit the like button. It's 192 people listening in.
I'm sorry. Were you asking just about the RICO or the?
No, both.
Yes.
Thank you.
To what extent did the government's case at trial on RICO and sex trafficking overlap with the government's evidence and arguments on the Mann Act?
So, as the government said, itself said it was totally separate. But from the sex trafficking counts. The overlap, well, let me just back up.
Should the district judge hold the government to that for sentencing purposes? I mean, should the district court say, well, you put on all this evidence that the jury rejected, right? And now you want me to look at this evidence to support a conviction under this other, to support a penalty under this other offense that you were convicted of. But you've been presenting that evidence to the jury.
I think you have to just start with what are the elements that the government had to prove.
Yes.
And so, if they didn't have to prove,
thank you, Denise.
for the Mann Act, if they didn't have to prove coercion, they didn't have to prove a co-conspirator, then we know that there is no convicted conduct that includes coercion or co-conspirators. And that's really the starting point. And I think the evidence and the arguments just reaffirms in this case that that the evidence that the judge was relying on is totally separate and in fact was acquitted conduct because
well, his mixing and matching is what he's doing, right? I mean, the district court here reached into the evidence that was used to support the government's RICO and sex trafficking case to for purposes of establishing a penalty under the Mann Act.
Correct, and he found coercion when the jury had not found coercion, including as to those two specific instances, because the government made those arguments and expressly told the jury, which correctly under the jury instructions, that if they found coercion, each of those instances would have been sufficient to convict on the substantive sex trafficking.
Were there limiting instructions given or requested during trial that certain evidence would only be admissible with respect to certain of the charged offenses?
No, and that wouldn't really have worked here because there was a RICO charge, and as I'm sure Your Honor knows, under RICO, basically
everything would have come in as to RICO, but the idea that it's admissible as to RICO but not admissible, say, as to the Mann Act.
But
I guess what I'm going to
that
is...
would not have been legally permissible in this case because the Mann Act was also predicate acts to the RICO. I mean, that just wouldn't have been a valid instruction.
Well, I guess where I'm going with this is, does that mean that all the evidence that was admitted would have been legally admissible to prove any of the particular offenses? So, going towards Judge Baker's hypothetical, is there a scenario here where the judge was pulling evidence that was not, I don't know what you would say, admitted for purposes of proving the Mann Act, and then it's impermissible, say, for the judge to look at it with respect to the Mann Act when he's in the sentencing period? And I guess what I'm asking is that in fact the case here, or was all of the evidence admitted for unlimited purposes such that there is no, as long as it would be relevant and probative to prove up another count, then it would have been permissible for the judge to consider it with respect to that count?
Have a great day. Stay blessed and stay. Thank you.
To consider it is because it's acquitted conduct, and the judge.
Well, right, but I guess let's give you that. Let's accept that. Let's accept that premise for the purposes of my question. That yes, it would underlie some of the acquitted counts. I think then the question becomes: is it overlapping, right? So would it be permissible nonetheless to consider it with respect to the convicted counts?
No.
And right, and I understand your answer is no, and I'm trying to get at why. So, is it because it wouldn't have been admissible to prove the Mann Act count? In other words, does your argument depend on that at all? Or I think what I hear you arguing is if there is an element of the acquitted charges that does not match an element of the convicted charges, what is embodied in the element of the acquitted conduct, which is coercion, fraud,
I'm sorry,
is now completely off the table for sentencing. Is that your argument?
So that is our principal argument.
Okay.
There's a secondary argument, and I hesitate to even raise it, but it's, we've made it, that even if you actually adopt the relevance test that the district court imposed, that these things wouldn't have been relevant, but I don't think the court should.
The relevancy test, I find your argument confusing on that because I think the district court made, frankly, I think your brief mischaracterizes or caricatures the district court's use of the word relevancy. I don't think he's saying relevant in the sense of relevant conduct under the guidelines. I think is taking relate to in context of having probative value with respect to one of the elements of the convicted offense, which is another way of saying it would have been admissible evidence to prove an element of the charged
Let
offense.
that man go.
I think
No.
that's right, and our point
To get back to them freak offs. No, no,
on
no.
that, especially
Everybody did not
and I think
consent.
we make
Stop
this point in
lying.
the opening brief as well, is that
What was the
that
beating
is far
for?
too broad, and
What was the hotel beat down for if everybody
Because
consented?
I think in your brief you say that blows
Stop
up
lying.
the acquitted guideline because it would
Let your daughter, your wife, your sister, your mama
it's
go over there and play with it
a circular definition with relevant
and see if you
conduct,
feel
and I
the
think
same
that's
way.
not what the judge was saying. It would be a smaller subsection of things, much smaller subsection of things than anything involving relevant conduct.
I don't agree, Your Honor, and I think that it's a distinction without a difference because the concept of relevance, as the district court was using it, as Your Honor seems to be using it, is the same as Rule 401, which is incredibly broad, and as this court has, repeatedly held, it's a very low bar, and it basically includes sweeps in, many things. And
Well, no, take this. Defendant is convicted of one bank robbery. At sentencing, the judge considers 10 other bank robberies that were
He's a predator.
committed on completely different days using, and let's posit, completely different modus operandi. But it's relevant conduct. And so the judge considers all 11 bank robberies when calculating the guidelines. I don't think that one would then say that had there been a trial on bank robbery 1, all of the other 10 bank robberies would have come in as relevant evidence because under my hypothetical, where there was no common MO, it would not be admissible under 404B. So I don't think if you draw a Venn diagram, you're going to find perfectly coinciding circles for relevant conduct under 1B1.3 and relevance under the rules of evidence to prove up an offense.
Well, even if that's the case, on what we're dealing with here, this evidence of coercion would not have come in to prove the Mann Act. Clearly, it would have violated 404, 403. There are numerous reasons that I think it's pretty indisputable that if all Mr. Combs had been charged on and all he'd been tried on was Mann Act, that we wouldn't have,
But what about the idea that if he had, let's say he was only charged with the Mann Act and his defense was along the lines of one of the things the defense raised at trial, which is he never intended for the specified activity to happen after these folks crossed state lines, that it just kind of happened. And one of the ways the government tried to disprove that or tried to prove his intent was saying, no, he used to talk about this all the time, what he wanted to happen. In fact, there was one time on a plane that within 24 hours before the event happened, he actually showed a woman videos of prior episodes where the activity had happened. And sure enough, within 24 hours, that's what he arranges to happen. Again, that's proof that this is exactly what he intended to happen. It is not mere coincidence. Why would that not be admissible?
That's not what the defense to the Mann Act was. Most of the case was focused on the coercion and the RICO, and to the extent...
I thought that was part of the defense, no?
No, it wasn't, Your Honor. The only arguments that were made specifically about the Mann Act by the defense was the argument that, based on the testimony of the and the evidence in the case, was that the escorts were paid for their time.
Well, right, that's the same argument. They were paid for their time, and everything that happened afterwards was just not something that he was arranging. He was not transporting them for the purpose of what happened afterwards. It was just their time.
I guess I'm getting a little lost. I apologize. But I think the point here is that the principal point here is getting back to Your Honor's earlier questions and my dialogue with Judge Baker, is that you have to look at the elements. That's our position. You have to look at the elements. This idea that you have a relevance test is not consistent.
But your argument...
And I just want to highlight... I'm sorry.
Well, no, there's a question.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Well, finish your point, then I have a question.
I just wanted to highlight, and we've mentioned this in the briefs, but if you look at the history of the guideline, the Department of Justice wanted the commission to use the phrase relates to in the guideline, and the commission rejected that because they thought that was far too broad, and they went instead with the language that's in the guidelines.
So the problem I have with your test of an elements test is that sometimes the problem is you have different elements, right, for the RICO, for the sex trafficking versus the Mann Act. But there's evidence, conduct that can underlie the government's case, right, in all these sets of charges. And the mere fact that you're acquitted doesn't, by the plain terms of the guidelines, right, it doesn't take it off the table insofar as that conduct is also convicted conduct. And so what we're trying to discern here is where is the line, right, for purposes of sentencing. And so you just can't rely upon a test of the because it cannot be that just because all conduct that's underlying the element of acquittal is then taken off the table. Right? It can't by itself.
Well, I don't agree with that because I think it's going to depend on the case, right? And there are going to be cases that are maybe closer than this one. So you're going to have cases, for example, where there are maybe inconsistent verdicts, things like that. That's not the case here. This was very clear. You know, I sat through this trial for 8 weeks. The government's focus from beginning to end was on the sex trafficking and the RICO. The whole, where the debate was there coercion or was this sex voluntary? That was the gist of what was being disputed.
It was an afterthought. The Mann Act was just an afterthought in the government's prosecution. I mean, it was there, but it was effectively a sideshow. But that's the question, right? And can the government then look to all this effort, can the district court look to evidence presumably rejected by the jury and acquitting on these other things for purposes of finding the penalty in the sideshow? And why shouldn't we just hold the government to what it argued?
We should, absolutely. And I think the whole point of this guideline was to deal with the fact that many people in America, not just Supreme Court justices, not just other judges, but, you know, have really questioned whether it is both constitutional and right and consistent with respecting jury verdicts to allow acquitted conduct to be used to drive a sentence in this way. And I want to highlight that, and we mentioned this in our brief, but I'm not sure we gave it the prominence it should. This sentence was the highest sentence ever imposed for a Mann Act defendant sentenced under the same base offense level and criminal history category.
Well, let me ask you about that. So, would this offense be let's take the violence off the table, right? The allegations of violence that the jury rejected in the acquitted counts. What about would this verdict? Would this sentence be substantively reasonable, in your view, given that we also have factual findings of psychological abuse, emotional abuse, and plying these two women with drugs? One of them became an opioid addict as a result of it. Would presumably that's still on the table if we take away the violence?
I think that it would be substantively unreasonable under the correctly calculated guideline range because it would be multiples. It would require a variance upward based on the acquitted conduct.
But that's not. But the guideline range is just. It's not a per se rule. It's a guideline, and it's a starting point. But then you look at the facts of the case, and we have two statutes that tell us you look at all these factors, and we have one statute that says there's no limitation. And am I correct in understanding that we have this factual finding that we have two women who applied with drugs to participate in this, and one of them became an opioid addict. And so doesn't that support the reasonableness of this, putting aside the violence?
Well, a couple of points. First of all, You're correct that that's what the district court found. The evidence in the trial is much more complicated than that.
But you don't challenge and appeal those factual findings. You're not challenging that factual findings. You're making legal arguments.
But this court has to review the sentence based on the guidelines calculation taken as a starting point, and this is actually where I was going. I don't even think I got to this.
You did it.
The Supreme Court in Martinez-Molina and this court in Seabrook and many other cases have held that a guidelines miscalculation is a significant procedural error that requires a remand and resentencing in most cases, even under plain error review. And so, for instance, this court has held that if you accept the guidelines argument, even in part, a significant upward variance would have been required, and a remand is required because the judge would have had to explain that variance. And indeed, this court has held that even where the sentence is within the range of the correct guideline range, a remand is necessary.
But sometimes, go ahead.
Sorry, what do we do with the fact that the district judge here, after each guidelines finding, made the statement that he would have imposed the same sentence with or without this increase? It seems to me that if we accept the judge's representation that guidelines decision, it was not what drove his ultimate sentence, that then moves us into the question of whether he could have used the acquitted conduct for the 3553A calculation. But how do we get over that sort of potential harmless error hump that he did make that statement after each increase was imposed?
So this court has repeatedly held that a major variant, that the district court cannot insulate itself from appellate review by saying that he would give the same sentence. The Seabrook is one example. We've cited others in our brief, and the Supreme Court in the Molina Martinez case, and this court and other cases have pointed out, for example, that this isn't like a new trial and a resentencing,
Yeah, but sometimes we have affirmed. I mean, I understand. You can point to some cases where we say, you know what, we're not sure the guideline error really was harmless. We don't know. The judge said it wasn't, but we don't have a high level of confidence. The judge was very emphatic here, and careful. So it doesn't sound very boilerplate. It doesn't sound like anything the district judge did here was boilerplate.
It's also clear that the acquitted conduct drove the sentencing.
And then we would get into the Sixth Amendment issue, right?
No. I'm talking about the guidelines calculation as a starting point. And the other thing that is really important here is that the district court's guidelines calculation exactly mirrored the PSR, and it seemed clear that the district court was really planning to follow the PSR, and indeed, when he imposed the sentence, he initially said he was following the recommendation.
Wait a minute. Are you implying that the district court wasn't thinking for himself, and that he was...
No, not at all.
Then what does this argument about tracking the PSR have to do with anything?
It has to do with the fact that the guidelines range was very important in the ultimate sentence.
And you're saying that the district court must have placed the same weight on the guidelines that the PSR did?
No, that's not...
Then what is the implication? I'm trying to understand what your implication is. Because it sounds like you're going to a place where the district court was not thinking for itself or was somehow implicitly adopting parts of the PSR that it didn't or something.
No, Your Honor, that's not what I'm saying.
Then what are you saying?
My point is simply that this court has repeatedly held that significant procedural errors require remand. I mean, two of the cases...
that I understand, but no, I want to go back. What were you talking about with the PSR? Because I don't understand that point.
Okay, what I'm saying is that you don't know what the district judge would have done if he had understood the guideline range to be either 21 to 27, which it would be if you accept all of our guidelines argument, or 30 to 37 if you get rid of the grouping, just for example.
Even though he told us what he would do. I understand the argument. I would understand. I don't think you made it quite this way, or maybe this is what you meant to say, that if we agree with you that all of his guideline enhancements were wrong,
that was prepared.
He never said, and even if all of my guideline calculations are wrong, I would do the same thing, as opposed to any individual thing. So if we found one guideline error, though, he said to us
he was
would have done
very
the same thing, and you're
detailed.
saying that we don't take that at face value?
That's correct, Your Honor, under the precedents. And
well, some of them we do. I mean, there are some cases where we have reversed and remanded, and there are others where we said, well, the judge told us he would do the same.
So where there would be a significant upward variance like this, we don't have another case the government could possibly cite where the sentence was the highest sentence for any person in this criminal history category and base offense level.
Yeah, but his way of going about this prostitution
enhancement, there's no case remotely like that that the government could point to. And indeed, some of these cases involve things like in the Bennett case, and I forget the name of the other one. In a couple of the cases, the judge says the guideline range is X, which is a little bit above the statutory maximum, and then sentences well below the statutory maximum. And this court says it has to go back because the judge thought the guideline range was higher than the maximum. So, in that case, clearly there's been a significant departure from what it could have been, and the judge gives reasons, but the court sends it back, and that's what the court should do here. That's what's required by those cases.
Okay.
I understand your argument. I mean, I fully understand your arguments about the acquitted conduct for purpose of the coercion and leadership enhancements, right? Those were four points apiece. But when it comes to the victim,
y'all need to help me reach my goal, especially if you asking me questions. Yeah.
Jane and the escorts as victims.
Help me reach my goals. Hit the like button. Like, share, and subscribe.
Conduct argument. You're just arguing with or disputing the district court's characterization of these people as victims. So that doesn't really fall into the acquitted conduct bucket for purposes of deciding this case.
You got any kids, Keisha? Let your kids go hang out with them this summer.
Because they don't join you on
and
that.
see if you feel the same way.
By the way, a very helpful brief.
You women kill me, acting like y'all don't understand when people take, you tell them no and they still put the head in your body. Y'all kill me.
I think our principal argument on that, we are arguing that...
Yeah, okay, well then bye, because that's not what we're talking about right now, so get your ass on up out of here. Yeah, bye, Keisha.
There is that
we ain't talking about the Epstein.
Interpreted according to its plain meaning, which is someone harmed or injured by the offense, and that the application note is inconsistent with that plain meaning, so even understood.
Y'all kill me, act like y'all don't understand.
The grouping calculation was incorrect, and we're also preserving for further review a challenge to whether Stinson is good law.
Right, but so for acquitted conduct purposes and looking at harmless error and how this might have played out, if there was a mistake under the guidelines, we're only looking at we're talking about
it's almost double.
Right. Well, it takes us from, if we did 8, it would take us from, that would go from, we went from 50, would take us to 20. It's only, we're talking about 8 points, right? We're going from level 14 to 20.
The range would be 30 to 37 under that scenario, as opposed to 70 to 87, which was the starting point.
Can I ask you about the definition that the commission has given us of acquitted conduct? One of the things you pointed to contest the government's view is that there was a government proposal that acquitted conduct be defined using the word relating to or something like that. Related to. And the government has also pointed to a proposal that was before the Sentencing Commission that would use the word elements. And neither one of those was adopted. And instead they took this other definition that, as far as I can tell, they decided they didn't need to define further, and said something along the lines of, don't worry, it won't come up that often, and it's going to be really easy. District judges are going to be able to figure this out. Why should we worry about line drawing? And as I recall, there was a letter from the Judicial Conference Committee on Criminal Law warning them that this was a very ambiguous guideline, and that they very much should provide more clarity. And they didn't. They didn't take an elements test, which I think would have been very clear, and they didn't take the government's relating to, and they gave us one that says, don't worry, district judges are going to figure this out. And I don't know, maybe the district could figure it out. I'm having trouble as an appellate judge figuring it out. What are we to make of it if we decide that it is ambiguous, does the rule of lenity kick in to guidelines issues? Are there other interpretive principles?
There are two interpretive principles. So one would be the rule of lenity, and the other would be the related, but maybe more important, constitutional avoidance principle. And even to the extent, I understand the panel's position regarding, or Your Honor's position regarding the binding nature of those precedents we talked about earlier. But putting that aside, I think it's clear that at a minimum there are serious constitutional concerns with using acquitted conduct. And so I think, if the court finds that the guideline is ambiguous, it should be interpreted, the exception should be interpreted narrowly in favor of the defendant.
And this is sort of my last question. I don't know about my colleagues. Are you aware of any other appellate courts that either have decided this issue or are facing it right now? Is this bubbling through the circuits in other ways where we are soon perhaps to benefit from the views of our sister circuits?
I am not aware of any other appellate decisions interpreting the guideline. There are some decisions, relating to the Watts issue, but.
Sure, but you're not aware of anything currently bubbling?
My colleague advises me that there's a case pending in the First Circuit on this.
Do you happen to? Well, that's fine. Well, if it comes out, that's fine. If it comes out, we'll find it, but that's helpful.
Okay.
Unless there are any further questions, we have kept you up considerably past the 10 minutes, so, but don't go away, because we're going to see you again in rebuttal. So
sure, I'll have more to say.
I hope you have a bottle of water there. We will now hear from the government.
Managing multiple credit cards can feel like you have 50 extra mental tabs open. Switching apps, trying to remember which card earns what. Is it points, miles, cash back? It can make your brain.
Hey, K-Sales.
Good morning. Might be afternoon at this point, but may it please the court, my name is Christy Slavic, and I represent the United States on this appeal as I did in the district court proceedings below. Judge Subramanian correctly applied the new acquitted conduct guideline in this case, and moreover, in determining the appropriate sentence under Section 3553A, Judge Subramanian properly considered the aggravated manner in which the defendant carried out his Mann Act offenses.
He was aggressive.
You said aggravated manner. Let's talk about that. Why shouldn't we hold you to the way you prosecuted the case? You went to the jury and you said, this man did all these terrible things for purposes of the RICO conspiracy, for purposes of sex trafficking, and they acquitted him. And then on the Mann Act, it was just a sideshow, and you put him. I don't think there was any evidence or any live witness testimony. You just look at this, you said, look at these charts, and now you want us to rely on all this acquitted conduct that was presented to the jury, that was presumably rejected for purposes of, or to allow a district court for purposes of the guidelines calculation. So why should we hold you to what you argue to the jury?
Thank you for the jewels.
I have several responses, but
Floating heart.
First is that much of the conduct that the district court focused on in imposing the sentence was not acquitted conduct at all. In fact, it was admitted conduct. The extreme physical violence that took place in the context of these freak-offs and
I get all that. I understand that. That's not my question to you. My question to you is, why shouldn't we hold, it's not what the government, what the district court would like, but I'm asking why we shouldn't hold you in terms, require a district court to hold the government to what it presented to the jury for purposes of, for deciding the scope of acquitted conduct, to look at what you actually presented to the jury for purposes of those charges, and then asking, did it overlap with the acquitted charges? I don't think there's any overlap here.
Sure. So just backing up a moment to talk about how the case was presented. Counts 2 and 4 were the sex trafficking counts, and those, of course, were acquitted counts. Counts 3 and 5 were the Mann Act counts. all counts were charged as courses of conduct as opposed to specific instances. And for counts 2 and 4 that related to Cassie, that course of conduct related to the freak-offs that took place between 2009 and 2018, I believe. With respect to counts 4 and 5 that related to the hotel nights with Jane, that course of conduct was from 2021 through 2024. So the evidence of the hotel nights and the freak-offs related both to the sex trafficking and to the Mann Act charges. And that's how it was presented to the jury. It was never presented as this evidence relates to sex trafficking and this evidence relates to the Mann Act. There was never a dividing line.
But when you get to summation, there is, right? So you say, let's start with count 3. The defendant is charged in count 3 with interstate transportation for the purpose of prostitution related to freak-offs involving Cassie. That's how you describe count 3. I think that's right. And then you go on to talk about all of the evidence about escorts traveling. And it doesn't talk in your discussion of count 3, and similarly, it's a very, very mirrored for count 5 when you talk about Jane Doe. Doesn't talk about Ms. Ventura or Ms. Doe being coerced, or Ms. Ventura or Ms. Doe being transported. It says count 3 is about escorts traveling for the purposes of contact with Cassie, and count 5 is about escorts traveling for the purpose of contact with Jane. As Judge Baker is saying, where else can we divine the government's theory of those 2 counts other than summation, and why shouldn't we hold you to it?
So just to be clear, the government's theory was that the travel involved both Cassie and Jane and escorts. But I think that
what you said in your closing.
I don't have the exact words of the closing, but that was. I think that your other question is, why shouldn't the government be held to what it argued?
Let me just stop you for a second, because the last thing you say on count 3 is, quote, all of the examples that I just went over showed the defendant caused commercial sex workers to travel across state lines for freak-offs. The defendant is guilty of count 3 based on any single one of these instances. Then you say, let's move to count 5. So that's how you started and ended count 3.
So the point was, the government, in closing, went over several examples. It was not a comprehensive list of all the instances of travel because...
No, but the theory was that he caused commercial sex workers to travel. That was the theory on which you asked the jury to convict Mr. Combs on count 3.
Sure.
Not that he caused Ms. Ventura to travel, or that he coerced Ms. Ventura into something. The theory was he caused commercial sex workers to travel. Other than the constitutional challenges, there's no sufficiency of the evidence challenge to that for good reason. It looks pretty much like he did. But that's the government's theory, right?
That was the government's argument at closing. I think, kind of backing up, the import of this line of questioning is, shouldn't we hold the government to what it argued in closing? And I don't think that that's right. I think the theory is, if the government made this argument, doesn't that mean that the jury accepted that argument and didn't consider any other possibilities? And I don't think that that's a fair inference.
But what we're trying to do here is to figure out where, draw this line. So the jury acquitted on certain things and then convicted on other things. So what does the jury have to rely upon? Don't you think they're listening very intently to the closing argument? Isn't that going to be very, very important in their consideration?
Of course, Your Honor, of course. But the jury in this case, was properly instructed on each element of the Mann Act and had to find each element of the Mann Act met beyond a reasonable doubt. And I think it's, as a logical matter, I think it's an impossible task to discern the minimum quantum of evidence that would be sufficient to sustain the government's burden. And I think that sort of inquiry also goes against this court's precedent. Specifically the Martinez case that says a court only knows what the jury's verdicts were, not what the jury found.
Well, right. No, and that, I don't think anybody's questioning that. But the problem for the government is that there's a new guideline that says, figure it out, that basically says there is such a thing as acquitted conduct. And as Judge Subramanian pointed out, I think quite accurately in sort of speaking with the greatest amount of precision possible, there is no such thing as acquitted conduct. Juries don't acquit people of conduct, they acquit them of charges. They find that certain elements were not proven beyond a reasonable doubt. They don't find that someone's innocent. But now the guidelines have been amended, so there is a thing called acquitted conduct. We've got to figure it out. So the question is, how do we measure that? So we're not looking at general principles like Martinez saying, did the jury find something? The only place that you're going to find, I think, in our case law where we say an acquittal necessarily implies something is in our collateral estoppel branch of double jeopardy jurisprudence. And I think, I guess one question I would have for you is, why would that not defeat the government's argument, at least with respect to coercion in this case? If, for example, the jury had hung on the sex trafficking count, right? If the jury had hung on, well, no, no. My hypothetical is spinning out of control. I guess what I'm wondering is if there were some hypothetical additional count that the jury had hung on here that required a finding of coercion with respect to one of the two victims, why you would not be collaterally estopped under the double jeopardy clause from retrying the defendant on that count. Let's say there was a conspiracy to commit sex trafficking.
Well, let me just push
Why
back
would that
on,
not be
let me just push
precluded?
back on this hypothetical that a foundational issue that I have is that the defendant was not acquitted of coercion. He was acquitted of sex trafficking by force, fraud, and coercion. The jury was never asked, was there coercion?
Well, but we had,
sorry.
well, under that theory, there is no such thing as acquitted conduct. So you're kind of fighting the very principle of the guideline. You're saying that because there were three alternate elements, I think, fraud, force, or coercion, that because there are three alternate elements, there is no acquitted conduct. But you have to accept the premise because the guidelines have been amended. There is such a thing as acquitted conduct. So why don't you actually, let me frame it this way. Under your view, with respect to count two, what is the acquitted conduct?
So the commission thought very long and hard about this issue, clearly, and they declined to set any bright line rules.
Yeah, but now, here we are.
Exactly.
So what's the government's view of what the acquitted conduct is underlying count two?
So I think Judge Subramanian's test, which is...
No, that's, I think Judge Subramanian's test is what's overlapping conduct.
As a first step to Judge Subramanian's test, he described acquitted conduct as conduct that underlies the...
Yeah, so you tell me what conduct underlies count two.
What specific conduct? Well, I think a good example of conduct that could be considered acquitted conduct that the judge did not consider in applying the exception was the intercontinental video. That, of course, was evidence presented at trial that showed the defendant assaulting Cassandra Ventura during the course of...
So that's acquitted conduct in your view?
I think that that's a fair characterization.
So that's a use of force, but the other conduct that illustrates use of coercion is not acquitted conduct.
The reason that that's acquitted conduct, in my view, is because that does not tend to prove the elements of the Mann Act.
Well, no. That's the second question.
No. There's two things here. You can have acquitted conduct and you can have offense conduct under the guidelines, and they can overlap. And that's why the guidelines say where they overlap, you can consider them. So the government sort of doesn't lose by saying something's acquitted conduct here, because then the district judge, if it's overlapping, can still consider it.
Right.
So let me ask it this way. There is evidence on the flight back from Cannes that Mr. Combs sits next to one of the victims and shows these videos of the events that have happened in the past, and the government's argument to the jury is that's coercive, right? That this was an implicit threat, right? His discussion of releasing these videos was implicitly, if you do not continue to engage in this conduct, I will release this publicly, and that will destroy your reputation, right?
That's right.
So it seems to me that that's clearly acquitted conduct. I thought the government's argument is that it is also offense conduct, and therefore, because it's overlapping, the judge was allowed to consider it. So I want to ask you about just the first part of my question.
Okay.
In your view, did what Mr. Combs did on the plane back from Cannes also constitute acquitted conduct?
So I think The answer is maybe. I think it depends on the definition of acquitted conduct.
Okay, under the government's definition, is it acquitted conduct?
I think the judge properly...
No, under the government's view. Forget it. Let's pretend it's before sentencing happened. Under the government's view, is that acquitted conduct?
I don't think that because the defendant was not acquitted of coercion, I don't think it's necessarily...
Unless you're saying he wasn't acquitted of anything. Because if there was fraud, if there was force, there was fraud or coercion, he's guilty, right?
What I'm saying is, no, I don't think that that's right. It's not just if there was force, fraud, or coercion, he's guilty. He had to know or recklessly disregard...
There are multiple elements. But I think what your argument would lead to is that there's no such thing as acquitted conduct, because there's always multiple elements. One can't, from a jury's acquittal, ever know which of the elements they found unsatisfied. Ipso facto, there's never a category, there's never a bucket that's filled with something called acquitted conduct. Tell me why I'm wrong about that. In what world is there a bucket that's full of acquitted conduct in your position?
Your Honor, I think the this case is I think presents a lot of gray lines, and I think that the cases that come up in some of the dissents that the panel has already mentioned related to drug cases, for instance, where there's a conviction on a conspiracy count and an acquittal on a distribution count, or vice versa. And there's a special interrogatory where the jury finds specifically some amount of drugs. Like, I think that is very easily described as acquitted conduct.
Absent a special interrogatory, when does your test yield anything that constitutes acquitted conduct?
Your Honor, I think that in those sort of more straightforward cases where facts were presented directly to the jury and rejected by the jury, I think...
When does that ever happen except with a special interrogatory?
I think that can happen in, for instance, a 2-count drug distribution case. In one count, there's a conviction. In one count, there's an acquittal. I think the acquitted weight of the drugs would be...
Each of those counts, let's assume it's a distribution count. Each of those counts has multiple elements, right? Knowing what the drug was, distributing it purposely, right? I purposely handed it to you, that's I knowingly distributed it. But also knowing that it was heroin, right? Because the defense might have been, oh, I thought it was fake drugs. I thought I was cheating, right? Each of those has multiple elements. So you're always going to be in a position, if you're the government, taking the position I think you're taking, of saying, well, I don't know whether the jury found that he didn't know it was heroin, or I didn't know that he thought that he was purposely distributing it, or whatever it might be. So I don't understand your argument.
I think going back to the guideline itself, which does create a thing called acquitted conduct and convicted conduct, the commission deliberately did not define either term, leaving us in this position.
But it clearly must have some content.
Exactly, I think that's right.
And it can't be what we have always said under the Sixth Amendment is true, that there is no finding implicit in a verdict of acquittal. So that's off the table as to what the commission was trying to say.
That's right, Your Honor. And what the commission did say is that the court is in the best position to determine what is acquitted conduct and what is convicted conduct.
According to some rule of decision, not in terms of arbitrarily deciding A in one case and B in another. So we are tasked, as the district court was, with coming up with an articulable rule.
Sure.
So here we are.
And can I ask you please to articulate what's the principle? We have to write an opinion. It's the same question I posed to your friend. We have to write this opinion. What is the principle that distinguishes acquitted from convicted conduct?
So acquitted conduct, one thing that I think is supported by the commentary is that conduct that underlies an acquitted charge can be considered acquitted conduct. That's like the first step. The second step, of course, is whether that conduct can nevertheless be considered as relevant conduct. But that's that first step, what is acquitted conduct? What Judge Subramanian did is said, acquitted conduct is conduct that underlies an acquitted count, right? And under that definition, in this case, there was a lot of overlapping conduct. And so he had to determine what
So how do we know whether there's overlapping conduct? Where do we look to determine that?
I think that's where the judge's discretion, the judge who's overseen the trial.
But this is, we're trying to find out what the purpose of the guideline is to make sure that the jury's acquittal isn't negated. So we're trying to understand, this is difficult, right? We're trying to understand what the jury did. And we have a conviction and we have
kept his
right? So we're trying to understand what the jury did.
To himself.
So I think that the appropriate test here is the
and
test that Judge Subramanian articulated, which is to assess whether the conduct can still be considered as relevant conduct for the purposes of the guidelines.
You can't take somebody's right away to say no.
To whether that conduct tended to establish an element of the convicted count. And in this case, those two narrow instances.
Well, let me ask you that. Why is the coercion?
What's the law?
Tend to.
Hey.
Prove.
Did you hit the like button for me?
With conflict. Why does the coercive nature, or the coercion, strictly speaking, tend to establish the Mann Act, as opposed to, let's take coercion out of the equation, the fact, you can still look at the underlying raw facts. Mr. Combs coming back in the plane, sitting next to Ms. Ventura, showing the videos and all that. That evidence could still be considered, say, fairly to ascertain what Mr. Combs' intent would be for the events that would follow. And yet, it could not, say, under the defense's view, be considered for purposes of establishing coercion, because coercion was an element of one of the acquitted offenses.
So I think, to answer your first question, which is how does the travel in Khan and the situation on the airplane, how does that establish the Mann Act? I think it's for the reasons that Judge, you articulated in your colloquy with my colleague.
I'm saying, let's grant you that. Let's hypothesize that the events on the airplane are admissible and were properly considered by the judge to figure out, did Mr. Combs really intend what was all going to happen was going to happen? Let's just posit that. But isn't there a world in which the guidelines say, yeah, you know what, that's fine. Consider it for purposes of the Mann Act elements. But you can't draw the further conclusion that that was coercive in nature.
Well, the guidelines...
Because that's what the jury said did not happen, or did not find happened, and therefore it's acquitted conduct.
So I think because this acquitted conduct tends to prove an element of the Mann Act.
But how does the coercive nature of it, the inference that it was coercive, because I think that's really a distinct fact, right?
That inference is coercion is defined in the guideline. The fraud and coercion guideline, or excuse me, enhancement is set out in the guideline. And the definition under that, coercion under that enhancement.
Let's assume it is coercive conduct. I think what Judge Nardini's asking, and I have the same question, is how does the fact of its coerciveness tend to establish some, in whole or in part, an element of the Mann Act offense?
I think it relates to the temporal proximity between the coercion, the threats, I'll call it, the threats, the transport, and the demand for a freak-off.
So let's say the conversation instead was, instead of it being coercive on the plane, was when we get back, my plan is to fly some escorts in and you're going to have sex with them, and I'm going to pay them for that.
Sure. I think that would establish the intent.
Exactly. So why is the additional aspect of that conversation, that encounter on the plane that's described, that the coercive aspect of that, why is that add anything to establish in whole or in part the Mann Act offense?
Because I think it's what he's asking for. It's the threats are not followed by a request to go to dinner, a request to, ask Cassie to do the dishes. Those threats are followed by a demand for a freak-off. So the coercive nature of the threats are directly relevant to the intent to have the freak-off, which then later happens.
Well, okay. Except you've agreed that it didn't need to be coercive in order to support that aspect.
No, not necessarily. It just so happened in these two specific instances, the threats did amount to coercion under the enhancement. And I think that was, I think Judge Subramanian.
Can I ask you a hypothetical? And I don't know, it doesn't map onto this case, but I'm trying to make sense of the acquitted conduct guideline. We have a defendant who's charged with murder. He points a gun at the victim's head. He pulls the trigger at point blank range, kills the victim. He's charged with first and second degree murder. The jury acquits of first degree, which would have required a finding of premeditation, but it convicts of second degree murder. Let's say it was some sort of heat of passion or something he just did on the moment. Comes to sentencing. Is the premeditation, which is purely mens rea, in your view, acquitted conduct or not? And if so, is the judge, in my hypothetical, allowed to make a finding of premeditation by preponderance and sentence the defendant accordingly under the guidelines?
It's against the law.
So
it's still against the law.
The premeditation.
He got caught.
Because what I'm trying to do is draw a distinction between the actions, the physical actions.
Yeah, and it wasn't paying for it. He was pimping.
Mr. Combs coming back in the plane, sitting next to Ms. Ventura, showing the video, saying
he wouldn't let her say no. He needs to sit there. He needs more time to be truthful.
Clearly, they underlie in my hypothetical. Clearly, the underlying facts of the man reaching over with a gun, pulling the trigger.
You let a child, boy or girl,
clearly, in my hypothetical, they
tell you that the same thing happened to them, and let's see if you feel the same way.
Sure.
But the jury has acquitted on first degree murder, meaning they have
justifying his bad behavior.
Premeditation beyond
because everybody do it. Okay, well then everybody needs to go to jail.
If we pursue the government's theory here, which is you can consider the facts surrounding the walking back in the plane.
The very minute she tried to leave was the minute she said no.
Can draw whatever
she didn't want to do it.
The judge thinks appropriate because the facts
and
were properly
paying for SCX is against the law.
Then the judge, in my
and everybody who do it, not just him, everybody who do it needs to go to jail.
Under the guidelines amendment. Is that your view?
I think that's right. I think that's right, Judge.
Period.
Assuming I'm tracking your hypothetical.
And you don't think that
they sure better not let him out.
The commission was trying to avoid?
No, I think the commission understood that there's overlapping conduct.
I feel like everybody who think like that are predators. I think any male or female who justify those type of actions are predators.
Instances to prove the different counts.
I guess just from a gut instinct.
Yeah, you're a predator.
Like my hypothetical would be the prototypical.
You think it's okay?
Of what the guidelines, as amended, we're trying to avoid. So it seems hard then, if that is the government's view of how it would map out in my murder hypothetical, it's hard to accept how plausible the government's reading of the guideline is, more
Your
generally.
Honor, I think hypotheticals are, I find, very difficult in this context. The commission understood that these situations are incredibly fact-intensive, and that's in large part because they only come up after a trial.
He got away with it too long.
Trials are all different, right?
And there are people out there who think just like he thinks.
Weaves together differently. This is
no, all y'all need to be in the same cell, and y'all can play with each other.
What Judge Subramanian did
where it is illegal.
All 8 weeks. And imagine that being like
Papadilla.
Like a pizza,
they should have did that in Vegas.
Thinking about the
they need to go where it's legal.
As a pizza.
And we wouldn't be having this problem.
All the evidence adduced during that 8 weeks.
But that's an issue, you know, because that's where he needs to. Once he get out, he needs to move to Vegas. But he not gonna do that. See, that takes the thrill out of it. You know, the breaking of the law and the force and the beating. That pimp, his daddy was a pimp. Or his mama want pimps and hoes. All you have to do is move to where it's legal. And they're gonna be 50 million. Well, I shouldn't have to. I can live without it. No, you can't. I mean, it's just that simple. He brought this on himself. He, just like Trump, he felt like he could beat the law every time. They were a part of an elite organization, organized crime, where they have gotten away with it for umpteen years. I played the video where Trump was auditioning, interviewing Diddy to join their little elite organized crime. He just went about his a different way than Trump and Epstein. Just like Sasha Riley said they was recording them. Those minors. They were recording them. If y'all paid attention to Sasha Riley, they were being recorded. Remember? They bust in on him and the young girl. Right before he put that fork and knife, brought it to his, yeah. They were recording them too, just like Diddy. Just like Diddy. And when the little girl was saying whatever she was saying, they unalived her right there in front of him. And then Trump bust in. And remember they told Sasha that if you give the next person that's coming in any problem what we just did to her, we gonna do to you. Intimidation. But they were recording. Those minors couldn't leave when they wanted to leave. I just don't understand your way of thinking. That's why I think anybody who finds a way to justify this type of stuff in their head, that they have a predatory mindset. And I believe his mama absolutely knew Clive Davis from back. I agree with that too. His mom, she was a madam. Clive Davis being a predator, absolutely. And he went to all-boy Catholic school. Shit. You didn't want him to like girls. You sent him to an all-boy Catholic school. And Father John, or whatever that man's name is that was over the school that he went to, got him up with messing with the boys. Yeah, y'all better stop playing with that type of stuff.
Pizza pie. He's considering a slice. And what's in that slice, it's what tends to prove the Mann Act. And that's why when he looks at the two specific incidents of coercion, those incidents are specifically tied to transportation. They're tied to the Mann Act.
And I guess that's where I'm suggesting that I don't know how to follow the pizza metaphor, so I won't try. That it's a little bit more analogous in my murder hypothetical, that the judge in my hypothetical can consider the physical actions of people, pointing the gun, shooting, the bullet hitting, the victim
Globe
dying,
is a big place,
but would not be able to
for
consider the additional inference of premeditation. So you can
go
still
where
be
it's
considering the
legal.
slice if the slice is considered the evidence that was put before the jury.
Go where it's legal.
I'm
I
suggesting,
bet you right now he wished he would have went where it was legal.
Limit the inferences that can be drawn to the extent those inferences are part of acquitted conduct, and not also inferences that would themselves constitute an element of the offense.
I think that's right. Again, it's I find it very difficult to think about these hypotheticals in the abstract. But I think here that slice of conduct that the judge considered, those two very narrow instances of transportation, I think undoubtedly tend to prove the Mann Act and also meet the requirements of the enhancement under the guidelines.
Can I ask you, if I can change the subject a little bit. We've talked about any number of issues today. Can I ask you specifically about the leadership enhancement? One of the very specific questions we were talking about with your colleague on the other side was whether, as the government submits, there are, at an irreducible minimum, 5 criminally responsible participants in the Mann Act. And the government, as I understood your brief, said, well, there's Mr. Combs, number 1. There are the 2 victims.
That's right. Cassie and Jane, yes.
Cassie and Jane, so we're up to 3. And the government posited that the 2 escorts who were transported across state lines.
No, that's slightly inaccurate. Yeah, it's.
So why don't you clarify?
Of course. The 5 criminally liable participants, besides Mr. Combs, are, as you said, Jane and Cassie, the 2 victims. And then 2 of the owners of an escort service.
Oh, the owners of the escort service.
They weren't escorts themselves, but they were owners of the service.
Yeah, and one of them,
the transport of escorts who worked for that service.
So your argument
Diddy
is that
was
because they were
active with
involved in the transportation, and obviously, in your view, the evidence showed that this whole thing was clearly designed for prostitution.
That's right.
You're up to 5.
That's right.
If we were to agree with you on that point, does that make the whole question of acquitted conduct with respect to the leadership enhancement go away?
Yes, Your Honor, and I believe it could go away in another independent way, which is that the conduct was otherwise extensive, which is another prong of the leadership enhancement, and I don't think that the defendant even challenges that in his reply. So the leadership enhancement is met in both of those ways.
I mean, but I would think that he would be having a real good time in jail.
Remind me.
Hold on before I forget. Let's pause. Let's pause.
Did the government?
Yeah, cause they say he having a funky good time in prison. He can have his way. I mean, cause he was more infatuated with the guys than the girls. Where is that? Where is it at? He don't want them girls. And this podcaster right here, he act like he in love with Diddy. Baby, he be acting like he in love. Yes, sir. Where is that one? What? Oh boy, let me go to my he be acting like he in LOVE, love. Yeah, that's.
If Puffy would have just came out, I think he would have been taking less of a hit.
I agree.
You know what I'm saying? If he'd have came out and said, hey, Cassie's been blackballing me because I'm really gay, I go both ways, and boom, 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 it would have been a total. If Puffy would have just came out, I think he would have been taking less of a hit.
I agree.
You know what I'm saying? If he'd have came out and said, hey, if Puffy would have just came out, I think he would have been taking less of a hit.
I agree.
You know what I'm saying? If he'd have came out and said, hey, Cassie's been blackballing me because I'm really gay, I go both ways, and boom, 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 it would have been a total different atmosphere for him. Just real.
Yeah, I wonder if Puffy has a boyfriend right now in jail. What do you think?
I believe Puffy may have engaged in some activity.
Right. They say the inmates, they fight each other over the right to make his bed in the morning.
Anybody doing that is participating in the activity. If that's true, like, I don't know. I don't think Puffy would have to say that. But what do you think about that phone call?
Which one?
With him and his son.
No, I didn't hear it.
What, you didn't, come on.
No, I didn't hear it. But
if Puffy would have just came out, I think he would have been taking less of a hit.
I agree.
You know what I'm saying? If he'd have came out and said, hey, Cassie's been blackballing me because I'm really gay, I go both ways, and boom, 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 it would have been a total different atmosphere for him. Just real.
Yeah, I wonder.
He didn't want them
if Puffy has a
females.
boyfriend right now in jail.
He wanted to be
I
able to
believe
see
Puffy
them
may
them
have,
guys.
Engaged in some activity.
Right. They say the inmates, they fight each other over the right to make his bed in the morning.
Anybody doing that is participating in the activity. If that's true.
I don't know why you guys that's in here want to act like.
But what do you think about that phone call?
You know, people prostitute. He wants y'all.
Not in here.
What you didn't come on.
Nah,
The men, the male escorts made more money than them females.
Yeah, you need to talk to him.
Okay.
The prison.
But y'all okay with that?
When he's talking about, is Jay-Z getting back to you? Not responding. Then he said, okay. Everybody out there quiet all of a sudden, huh? He said, don't worry about it. He said, yo, such and such want to know what to do about his card note.
That's his lover.
He told him, yo, man, tell him you're going to host a show or something. Don't you see what I'm dealing with? He said, but everybody's getting their laughs on. But we'll get the last laugh.
Jay-Z.
It's a jail call. I don't know how you ain't got that, but I had to scratch. Yeah. You gotta come back to the 100-sided clubhouse.
Okay, yeah, whatever you want.
You gotta come back.
Whatever you want, man. I've been on before.
This is content that we
This is content.
Academics gives us all props. He tells us every morning, I go to the 100-sided clubhouse, replays, and get content. But yeah, that phone call was wild, bro.
I'm gonna check it out.
Yeah, it was wild. Like,
hold on. Let me see if I can find it.
Up. There's no way.
Hold on. Twitter's usually a good place for this. So
yeah,
this is Diddy called.
Shell called to his son.
On his Justin? Or
yeah, one of them. Yeah, it was a
piece of box.
But I could
piece
tell he's
of gate.
kind of adapting. You know, I can hear the aggression and he like on some, you know,
shade.
His mentality is changing.
Yo, listen. Do not entertain none of this nonsense and nothing over the phone. I'm gonna need you to get rid of all the leftovers.
Why you gotta get rid of stuff?
What? All the boxes. He's talking in code. All the boxes. Okay. Make sure you recycle the plastic like we talked about. Yeah. Did Jay reach out yet? Nah, Bob. He ghosting.
Yeah, watch.
Hey, this motherfucker doing. These sweet girls, I'm in here.
Did Jay-Z reach out?
You about to get out on bail. No. Hey, yo, check this out. Need you to reach out to the producer. Let these motherfuckers know there's a release date for that new Netflix movie. Alright, Bob. It's just...
Why he gotta get rid of stuff? He ain't did nothing.
You heard him? That's a threat. Keep going. It's gonna say some more.
That's it. That was the whole thing.
Oh, it's another part too.
More part? Yeah.
Yeah, he ain't do nothing. For all y'all freaky, nasty, perverted people. Why he gotta hide them pizza boxes? Pizza gate.
But he said
there's a code going on.
He talking about reach out to the producer.
Yeah.
Fuck that and let them know it's gonna be a new term to that.
Yeah, I mean, if he ain't done nothing, why you putting your son into some stuff like we talked about? So you done already told them.
We're gonna laugh the loudest later.
You done already groomed your kids.
I believe we're gonna wake up once he figures out whatever.
And y'all talking about let him out.
Accept what he's gonna accept.
The neighbors in the neighborhood are petrified. Thinking about him getting released. But if he ain't done nothing, why? Listen, have those pizza boxes, get rid of that. Get rid of the evidence. You remember the plastic? Get rid of that. Like I told you, remember? But don't say nothing on the phone. You ain't done nothing. Why you just can't talk freely? Yeah. So your same habits, because you are a predator, PDFer, you have instilled these tactics into your kids. That's why they got the same charges like his daddy, like father, like son. I mean, it just blow my mind for people to come over here and start saying, "Oh man, going across straight line, people do that every day." Well, they need to go to jail every day. And when Trump to the dump, start sending them asses to them foreign countries. Yeah, so that they can terrorize y'all and do whatever they want to you. Male or female, I want y'all to remember that. Because that's their plan. They want to be able to send career criminals over to those foreign lands. Yeah. El Salvador and all of that type of stuff. Remember that. Remember, you thought it was okay to be a career criminal because they do it every day. You think it's okay to take people's private areas, even when they say no. I don't care if they said yes 50 million times. That one time they say no, you need to respect that. Respect that no. Can't nobody tell me no. Okay? So they just send your ass on over to El Salvador. Then put you in some of them detentions where they raping men and females. They treating all them hoes the same. And I'm talking about HOLE, the same. Wherever you got a hole back there, down there, they taking that. They letting you know how it feel to take that. And then the more you say no, the more they go in. The harder. When you start saying no, they go, woo, they just tell that, yeah. Yeah, I bet you'll have a new heart about it. Yeah. And he teaching that to his sons. And they got cases now. And y'all think this shit is okay. Fuck is wrong with y'all?
Think he's holding some things to try to get people to do certain things, whatever that may be.
They was on board with it when it was going down, baby. But once y'all start having to sit your ass in jail, and now you mad at them.
Come out of the closet and tell everyone that he's gay. And Cassie is.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He wasn't into the females. He never, not one time, beat them guys when they say, no, I ain't into that. Why he didn't beat them guys? Why he didn't strong arm them guys? Because that's who he was there for. Yeah, he went right behind them. He wanted to smell that cologne on her so he could feel like he ucking them dudes. Yeah, he wanted what did I call that stuff? Yeah, they glaze, icing. He wanted they glaze all over his body. Give me that glaze. No. He rubbing them dudes glaze on his nipples. He didn't want them girls. They thought they was in a relationship. He was in love with the dudes. He like looking at that pallywhacker. Yeah, he like seeing them reach places that his ass couldn't reach with his. On TV. Oh, I was gonna say that. They said he was a Tootsie Roll, but we ain't trying to dance. I mean, yeah. He liked seeing a man do what he could not do. yeah. You don't know what it feel like to get up in there, make somebody head hit the headboard, run from that thing. You don't know nothing about that. I play too much. You don't know how to catch a girl slipping with a It's like, ah! You don't know nothing about that. Every moan and groan your ass get, yeah, it's to stroke your ego. She ain't feel shit. Yeah. 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 You like watching that. Oh man, I wish I could make a move like that, grown like that. Ooh, can I feel it too? Oh, I want to feel it too. Let's get back to these closing arguments before I make hurt his feelings. Yeah. And then you go, never one. When that boy said no, that man said no, oh no. Hell fuck no. You can't even record me. Close that down. Did you strong him and did you slap the taste out of his mouth? Did you drag him across the floor? Oh, now cause you respect him. Yeah, that was your boo on the code. In your mind, that was your boo. Yeah, you treated her like she was a hook. And that's why your ass is in jail. Let's get back to the hearing. Yeah, let's go.
Present arguments that the escorts and their employers were members of the alleged racketeering enterprise.
No, Your
or
Honor.
conspiracy?
The only individual that
Mrs. Tom, did I speak to you? Hey, lady.
Criminally responsible participant for the purposes of the leadership enhancement was Christina Quorum, who was an employee of Mr. Combs and who was alleged.
My question was about in terms of when you argued the RICO conspiracy count.
Yes.
To the jury. Did you argue that the escorts or Combs, number one, there are the two victims?
That's right. Cassie and Jane, yes.
Cassie and Jane, so we're up to three, and the government posited that the two escorts who were transported across state lines.
No, that's slightly inaccurate.
Wanted to see one man cheeks.
Of course. The 5 criminally liable participants.
You wanted to see them cheeks clench.
Mr. Combs.
Yeah.
As you said, Jane and Cassie, the two victims. And then
he got turned on like the females got turned on.
Owners of an escort service.
Oh, the owners of the escort service.
They weren't escorts themselves, but they were owners of the service.
I'm sorry.
Who facilitated the transport of escorts.
Yeah, take that.
Oh, I see. So your argument is that because they were involved in the transportation, and obviously, in your view, the evidence showed that this whole thing was clearly designed for prostitution.
That's right.
You're up to 5.
That's right.
If we were to agree with you on that point, does that make the whole question of acquitted conduct with respect to the leadership enhancement go away?
Yes, Your Honor, and I believe it could go away in another independent way, which is that the conduct was otherwise extensive. Which is another prong of the leadership enhancement, and I don't think that the defendant even challenges that in his reply. So the leadership enhancement is met in both of those ways. With respect to...
Were those, remind me, and I should know this, and I don't recall, did the government present arguments that...
My coworkers thought I'd get fired for eating these gummies. Funny how I became the most productive person in the office. Just because I sleep like a baby now. So I almost made the dumbest mistake of my life. I got these legal sleep gummies with and honestly, I was ready to return them. I did not expect them to be this crazy. But before I was going to ship them back, I figured I'd at least try one. Since I already wasted
they need to go back and hit him for the drug charges. That pink cattle or whatever that mess was.
Their employers were members of the alleged racketeering enterprise.
No, Your Honor. The only individual that the government identified as a criminally responsible participant for the purposes of the leadership enhancement was Christina Quorum, who was an employee of Mr. Combs and who was alleged...
My question was about in terms of when you argued the RICO conspiracy count to the jury. Did you argue that the escorts or their employers were members of the RICO conspiracy?
No.
So I take it your argument would be that to the extent the district judge could permissibly consider the escorts and their employers, there would have been no overlap at all with acquitted conduct. That
Exactly.
would be your argument.
Exactly, Your Honor.
And then can you remind us who the judge said, I know I have this here, who the judge said were participants?
Who were criminally liable participants?
For the purposes of the increase, right?
Yes.
James and Collins?
Ventura,
Jane,
Quorum.
Quorum, who was the only employee.
And then James and Bridget Collins.
Bridget Creshover Collins, yes.
Those are the two
Those are the two
employers. So if
escort
we
employers.
knock out, if we were to say to drop out Quorum.
They went
That's right.
in
Still have
dancers and
five.
came out hookers.
That's right.
And that's
Hookers. And two,
that
at
was
least
the
two of them thought that they was the only
he also
one.
said the services of numerous
They done
outsiders
fell in
that
love
were
with that
peculiar and
cat.
necessary to defend.
That's right.
Why
and that
must
is
I
correct.
Some of
feel
whom
like
included
that?
his,
Why must
among that number,
I
his
chase the
assistants.
cat?
That's right, but the
Yeah.
assistants were not alleged to have been part of the racketeering
They
enterprise.
thought they was the only one.
So that is, like I said, that's another way to support the
Karma
application
got
of the
Diddy.
leadership enhancement
Got his
in that
number.
case without even touching acquitted conduct or potential acquitted
If he
conduct.
gets out, he will get.
You know,
He will have a target on
with
his head.
respect to,
Yeah, I hope they didn't turn right around and hit him on
the
drug charges. They
3553A
turn right
factors, you
around
touched
and
on
hit him
this,
in for Florida because they have not hit him for
with my
his
colleague,
Florida
but
act.
as Judge, you pointed out,
Just New York and California,
the
I
case law is
think.
finding that under the 3553A factors, sentencing courts can consider acquitted conduct. But I just point out that what the judge did here, what really drove his Section 3553A analysis, didn't rely on acquitted conduct. It didn't even rely on disputed issues to begin with. And let me just give you an example. In assessing the history and characteristics of the defendant, the court found that the defendant abused the power and control he had over the lives of women he professed to love dearly. He abused them physically, emotionally, and psychologically. That's not acquitted conduct. That was all admitted conduct. The defendant admitted from the outset of the trial that the defendant engaged in horrific domestic violence. And so all of that conduct was admitted. In assessing the seriousness of the offense, the court noted that the defendant plied Ms. Ventura and Jane with drugs. That was also admitted. The defendant admitted to personal use quantities of drugs that he shared with his girlfriends during freak-offs. That was admitted. In thinking about the seriousness of the offense, the court found that the conduct occurred for over a decade and with tremendous frequency over that time period. That has nothing to do with acquitted conduct.
On the drugs, let me just ask, if you had said he had drugs of his own and he shared them with Ms. Ventura and Ms. Doe, I understand your argument that's not acquitted conduct. You've just said he plied them with it, which sounds to me very much like coercion, which is what we've been talking about, may or may not be acquitted conduct.
The testimony was that the drugs were shared at these freak-offs and hotel nights with the girlfriends so that they could get through the freak-offs and the
But the
hotel
word you just used was plied, which to me is using the drugs to get their compliance and participation, which again goes back to coercion. But the fact, there are at least facts that he shared drugs is the point. But did Judge Subramanian talk about plying?
Shared drugs, those were Judge Subramanian's.
So that sounds like he's talking about coercion.
Well, I think the point of that is that he shared
I'm finna
them,
shut it
not
down,
just shared them with
Mrs.
drugs,
Tom.
like shared them with girlfriends trying to be nice.
They're not supporting
But
the
he shared them in the
platform.
context of freak-offs and hotel nights so that those women could get through the hotel nights and freak-offs. They
You're
both
saying there's sort
testified.
of a level of misconduct that falls short of coercion? Is that what you're suggesting?
That's exactly right. That was admitted, and that those categories of misconduct involve physical abuse, which was fully admitted. The
Did
defendant.
Judge Subramanian say anything to suggest
Them booty
that he was
bandits.
thinking about a
Off the
category
chain, yep.
of misconduct short of coercion? Or do we need to interpret those statements in light of what he had previously stated, which was that there
Yep.
was coercion, and that even if he could
What did I
not
call it
consider the
other
coercion
day?
under the guidelines, he would nevertheless
I
do
be
it
saying such
under the
crazy stuff. I don't be
3553A
remembering all the
factors.
time.
So why should we, in other words, why should we, considering he already said there was coercion, why would we not read those comments as his illustrations of the coercion rather than a suggestion on his part that they were misconduct that fell short
I called them booty guts.
I think you read the words of the conduct that he's describing, and what I've just
They like to get
what I've just read
them booty
is
guts.
admitted conduct. So call it coercion, call it physical abuse. It's admitted.
Well, but again, the words the judge uses are, you plied them to drugs, forcing Ms. Ventura into addiction. That may well be true, but our question is not whether that's supported by the facts. Our question is, doesn't that show the district court considering the conduct that is coercive? Because plying and forcing don't sound like something different than coercion.
I think that in this case, where the drug use and the drug sharing was admitted, I think that can't be acquitted conduct. I think that that's admitted conduct. And I think that the judge is free to consider it, and especially in the 3553A context, where there aren't restrictions on considering acquitted conduct under the binding precedent of this court. So I think that the judge was, I wouldn't necessarily agree that he's describing coercion, and I think he's free to rely on that in imposing the sentence under the 3553A factors.
At which point then we get into the constitutional question, if it is in fact
Too
acquitted
ambiguous.
conduct. That was not.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. What? We've been talking a lot about the guidelines and Judge Subramanian's application of the acquitted conduct guidelines. And the last thing that I would say on this is that even if Judge Subramanian made an error in his application and interpretation of the acquitted conduct guideline, which we don't think he did, but even if he did, that error would be harmless. And that is because he unequivocally and explicitly stated that he would impose the same sentence regardless of the acquitted conduct guideline. He reviewed voluminous sentencing submissions. He noted at the outset of the proceeding that there was a general lack of guidance with respect to this guideline. He considered the arguments
Put
of all
all
the
questions on the
parties,
super chat,
and
super
he
sticker,
provided
please.
detailed reasons for his application of the various enhancements.
Could you remind me, I think I asked this question to your colleague on the other side.
Oh, wow.
I recall that as he found individual sentencing guideline enhancements, he then would say, I impose this enhancement, even if the acquitted guideline conduct, even if the acquitted conduct guideline does not permit me to do so, I would impose the same sentence anyway. So he did this with respect to each of the three enhancements, right? Did he say something at the end that one could read as a wraparound? And even if I have erred with respect to all three enhancements, or did he only say that those three points?
So I think when you look carefully at the record, he noted that his sentence would be the same regardless of the acquitted conduct
Yeah, please
guideline.
do not come in here asking questions. Put them on super chats or super stickers, especially if you did not hit the like button before you asked questions. Please don't be rude and disrespectful to my platform. Support it. Yeah, if you have questions, put them on a super chat or super sticker. Hit the like button. Double tap the three dots at the top. No manners at all. Just rude and disrespectful.
The same statement with respect to the victim grouping enhancement.
So let me ask you this. Wouldn't there be an argument on the other side that even if we were to take at face value the district judge's statement that he would have imposed the same sentence, even if any one given guidelines enhancement was erroneous. If we were to conclude that 2 or more were erroneous, then we don't know what the sentencing judge's intentions would be, and we would normally send it back. Is that, would you agree or disagree with that statement?
I think I disagree, assuming I'm tracking this correctly. And I would point to the Jass and Dara cases from this circuit, where both courts were interpreting a new guideline enhancement. And like in the case here, where Judge Subramanian was interpreting the new acquitted conduct guideline. And in those cases, the courts noted that this was a new guideline, there was some ambiguity, and that even if they got that guideline wrong, which the court ultimately decided they did, they would impose the same sentence regardless. And that's exactly the situation that we have here. With respect to the acquitted conduct guideline, which is the guideline that could affect
vaginal suppositories.
Never out of 10. It's like putting chapstick on your forehead and hoping that it reaches your lips.
The fraud and coercion enhancement and the leadership enhancement, Judge Subramanian specifically said that it doesn't matter if the acquitted conduct guideline applies here or not, I would impose the same sentence. He did not say that with respect to the victim grouping enhancement, which has nothing to do with the acquitted conduct guideline. And I think that's a good example of why Judge Subramanian's statements that he would impose the same sentence regardless are not just simple incantations of magic words to evade appellate review. He specifically noted the ambiguity of this particular guideline that would affect those enhancements, and therefore any potential error, which of course we would submit there is none, any potential error would be harmless here.
Can I ask you this question? Would his 50-month sentence be substantively unreasonable in the absence of the district court's factual findings as to violence and coercion?
Just as an initial matter, the substantive unreasonable argument, I think, was waived. That was not raised by defense until the reply brief.
That's, again, a matter of nomenclature. They make a pretty good argument in their opening brief that then substance is that the sentence was substantively unreasonable. But so I understand your point about waiver, but continue.
So in determining whether a sentence was substantively unreasonable, this court has to review in light of the 3553A factors. And as I mentioned, the 3553A factors were very thoughtfully considered by the district judge.
I realize that, but if we took off the table the violence and coercion, would this pass muster would this be a substantively reasonable sentence?
Your Honor, I don't think you have to, because under the 3553A factors, all acquitted conduct can be considered.
Right.
But even if you did...
I realize that, but let's assuming for the purposes of my hypothetical, assuming that we take off the table the violence and the coercion, right, would this sentence be substantively unreasonable?
Your Honor, the
50 months for the man.
With the caveat that I strongly disagree that we need to take anything off the table for 3553A. A sentence is only substantively unreasonable if it is manifestly unjust or shocks the conscience. And we see that sort of dynamic in some of the other cases. I'm thinking of the Jones case in which Justice Scalia dissented. I can't remember the difference between the guidelines without consideration of acquitted conduct, but it was something astronomically high. And here, the 50-month sentence was below guidelines and reflected the fact that the judge really did consider the fact of the acquittals. If the judge had just ignored the acquittals and sentenced on the trafficking or the racketeering, the sentence would have been at least 15 years. There's a 15-year mandatory minimum term with a trafficking charge. This 50-month sentence was well below and well in line with other cases in this district. Judge Subramanian was very focused on other Mann Act sentences and asked the parties to provide a list of Mann Act cases and the sentences. And so he was fully aware of the different ranges of sentences that Mann Act defendants get. And that, was a consideration, of course, under the 3553A factors, but it was appropriately weighed against other 3553A factors.
That was a no?
Yes.
I just want to be clear. Was that a no? It would not be substantively
I don't remember the
unreasonable?
original question, but I think that's a no, Your Honor.
Let me rephrase my original question. So, I said, you're very good at evading my question, so that's very good, actually. If I was a district judge, I would say the witness will be responsive to the question. Would his 50-month sentence be substantively unreasonable in the absence of the factual findings of violence and coercion?
And the answer is no. Thank you, Judge Nardini.
That's what I thought you were going, but I wanted to make sure that we had an answer to the question. And let me just ask you, on the substantive reasonableness point, I think what I think I heard you said is that it wasn't raised in the blue brief, right?
That's right.
So, and this is a procedural unreasonableness claim that the guidelines weren't followed and there's violation of the Sixth Amendment. That's what your response is?
Sorry, say that again?
And that it's a procedural reasonableness challenge that goes to the guidelines and then to the Sixth Amendment.
That's right,
issue
Your
about fact-finding. That's what I understood your response to be?
That's right.
Just want to make sure.
Much more succinct than
I got the response, that I understood what your view of the framework is. Thank you.
Yes, that's right. The only thing that I want to add relates back to the Mann Act, and I just would correct the record that in closing, in the government's closing argument, the summary chart that the government pointed to did include the incident related to Jane that took place in, I think it was October of 2023, where the defendant made threats to Jane's friend.
Do you have a page number in the appendix just so we have it handy? If you don't, that's
fine. I
fine.
have the government exhibit, which is 1406.
1406?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll find it. Okay, I think we have exhausted our supply of questions.
Counsel,
No?
you're saying that argument was raised in your closing about Jane.
Yes, it was in the summary chart that the government relied on. It's lines.
And that's sufficient to say that you were arguing that Jane was transported as a premise for the Mann Act conviction in count 5.
That's right, and that's at line 38 on government exhibit 1406.
Yeah, again, even though the actual verbal summation says, for the defendant's hotel nights with Jane, there are also many examples of the defendant transporting escorts. And that's the discussion you have verbally, and you do say in passing here, by the way, check out 1406. You should refer to that chart. It has a lot of information in it.
This caught a lot of people off guard. A compound that was once known for industrial use is now being...
That's right, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Just to clarify, the escort traveled for that particular hotel night. It was not Jane who traveled, just to clarify.
So that exhibit 1406 is going to show us, in your view, that the escort traveled for that episode with Jane.
That's right.
That Judge Subramanian talked about at sentencing.
That's right, Your Honor.
Got it. Anything further? Okay, thank you very much to the government. Believe it or not, you have reserved 2 minutes, but we're going to give you a little bit longer because this has been extensive, but we're not going to go crazy because we have kept you up considerably past your initial time.
An hour and 45.
Why don't we try to keep it to 5, though? So just your highlights.
I'll go as quickly as I
Because your
can.
briefs, I will say this, on both sides, briefs are excellent, really do a great job laying out the issues. This has been very helpful, but why don't we give 5 minutes of rebuttal, so I'll just ask the courtroom. There we go. We've
Just real
dialed
quickly
up the clock.
on the point about Jane, and I don't want to dwell on that. Our argument about Jane, which is set forth in the reply brief, is not that that hotel night didn't occur. It's that wasn't connected to any threat, and there's no evidence of any threat. With respect to the harmless error issue, I want to highlight a couple of points. First of all, under all the case law, Gall, Rita, and their progeny, substantive unreasonableness is determined based on the guidelines as a starting point, just as the guidelines are a starting point.
Yeah, but you didn't raise substantive unreasonableness.
No,
You have a
we
brief
raised-
full of procedural unreasonableness.
What we've argued is that if we're right about one of the reasons we're right
that a remand is required is that if we're right about the guidelines, the sentence would be.
Sure, that I get the anchoring
That's the
function.
point there, and we rely on the Jones case also for the point that acquitted conduct, using acquitted conduct would make the sentence unreasonable. With respect to, I do want to be clear on the 3553. My friend on the other side kept saying that we admitted that our client plied Cassie with drugs and so on. None of that was admitted. That's not what was admitted. What was admitted was the unfortunate domestic violence only with respect to Cassie.
But you don't dispute the district court's factual findings here.
They did. They talked to that guy.
That he
The white guy.
Well, we
Cattleman or whatever that
we did dispute
drug
that
was.
below, but
here you're not.
point.
I mean, that's a fact we take as a given, because that
Well,
factual.
the evidence was quite mixed, and there was a lot of debate about this in the trial. And I think one of your honors in their questions got at the fact that the government's arguments about the drugs were part of their arguments about coercion, the way in which the drugs were used, and so forth. I don't want to dwell on that. I just want to be clear that that was heavily debated at trial, and that was part of what he was acquitted of when he was acquitted of sex trafficking. With respect to the leadership, just real quick, we do contest the otherwise extensive as well. And this court's case law actually highlights that with respect to otherwise extensive, it is kind of a head counting exercise anyway. And the owners of those escort services were not criminally responsible. There wasn't evidence of that. Those were legitimate businesses, and there's actually text messages where one of the people is telling Mr. Combs that you're just paying for their time. But most importantly, I want to turn to the acquitted conduct guideline. Under the government's view, the guideline would be totally pointless. McClinton itself, which is probably the proximate cause of the commission sitting down to write the guideline, illustrates the point. In McClinton, the defendant was acquitted of a murder charge and convicted of a charge that involved an armed robbery. And so clearly using the gun was underlied the robbery conviction, yet the defendant was acquitted of murder. And so
I was telling myself I wasn't going to ask you any questions in rebuttal, but I am. Could you respond to the hypothetical I gave to the government about the first and second degree murder case where the defendant is acquitted of first degree premeditated murder, convicted of second degree murder? What, in your view, assuming the only difference in the elements is premeditation or not, let's posit that, what is the acquitted conduct in that case?
I assume that the government would have had to put in some kind of evidence that.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'll remind you. My hypothetical is, let's say this is the only evidence in the case. The defendant reaches over with his loaded gun, puts it at the temple of the victim, pulls the trigger, and the person dies. That is the sum total of the evidence. And the jury acquits of premeditation.
As Tom said, we are all smart enough to know
what
Joe's escort service is. Yeah.
I mean, I guess
Joe's.
I feel like I would have to know more facts, but it's obviously the defendant was acquitted of having decided to shoot the person with premeditation. Maybe it was in the heat of a fight or something like that. So they were acquitted of the premeditation, but convicted of killing the other person.
The men workers got paid way more than the female O's.
I guess where I was thinking
the men
that all of my
was able to say no.
is acquitted conduct.
I ain't doing that.
Yeah.
No, I don't want you. I ain't no. We ain't doing that. You can't record me. He ain't put his hands on none of them.
You can look at all of the conduct.
Females got paid less
to trigger the shooting.
and got hand, feet, and toes put on them.
Of the second degree murder, but you can't look at the premeditation.
He was there to watch them dangling.
But it's not an element of the second count.
I think that's.
But I don't know if that's right.
I think that is correct. It's similar to another. My time is running out, but there's a hypothetical that's discussed in the hearings that led to the to the guideline in which someone proposes that there's an arson and there's a charge that the arson was
Ain't that
racially
something?
motivated, and
Even
the
the
defendant is convicted of an
two,
arson charge, but
they're
acquitted of a
discriminated.
charge
Yep.
that involves the racial motivation element, which is similar to that hypothetical. And I think the answer is
Rico.
the defendant is guilty of arson.
Yeah, I
but
remember
you can't enhance
Rico
the
was
sentence based on the
foin.
racial
He was
motivation. And I think
foin.
that's just like this case where
Foin.
the
I have to
doesn't
close my
require
eyes when I say foin.
I stole a
But he
couple of
said,
your
no,
minutes,
you
so
can't record
give me
me.
2
No,
more
you
minutes.
can't have the
Just
laptop
in
open.
closing,
No, no, no.
12 New Yorkers took 2 months out of their lives to serve on this jury.
There was no
They
problem.
listened to 34 witnesses, reviewed thousands of text
Yeah,
messages,
no.
videos, and other evidence, and deliberated for 2.5 days. Their unanimous verdict was not guilty on the most serious charges, and the jury did not authorize punishment for sex trafficking or conspiracy, but that's what drove the sentence. Here, we submitted
And Rico was one of the ones that he asked, you know, can I tap that? Rico said no.
The
No.
court shows that this was the highest sentence ever
He said, okay.
for this type of charge with this type of criminal history. And
No.
in closing, this appeal has been expedited and actually,
The male
I forgot to say,
prostitute
we'll rest on our briefs.
got paid.
We
They
have
got
also
paid
argued
more.
that convictions should be reversed, but if
They
that's,
absolutely
the court
got
doesn't do
paid
that,
the most.
the appeal has been expedited, and we would.
So when people be like, they got paid, no, the dancers turned hookers got paid the most. The most. Tipped and everything. And y'all talk about them, the females. They got paid, but y'all don't ever say nothing about the guys. He changed their whole career around. They didn't go in as, you know, stars, P-stars. They went in as dancers. I'm a private dancer, dancer for money. Any old person will do. They went in as dancers. Came out male hook cuss. And y'all say it wasn't no conversion. You lying to me. He talked to, I mean, you know, he ain't talking about their draws, but he damn sure talked them out of their careers. Yeah, now, dog, I know what I call for. I know, but let me sit down and talk to you. Let me tell you about me and my girl, what we got going on. No, but you hired me for dances. I got you, dog. I'm gonna tip you more, you know, if you just go along with the program. We got this little fetish channel. I mean, it'll be, ooh, when I tell you that cookie is good, it's just that I can't hit it like I know y'all can hit it, because I done seen that thing. You got a big old package down there. So listen, I'm just gonna tell you what we into. We just into a little, let me record you on my phone. You know what I'm saying? So I don't have to dance. I mean, unless you just want to, but that ain't what I need you for. Yeah, I want you to get down on it. Get down on it. Yeah. And let me tell you what I want you to do and how I want you to do it. And I got her, and she gonna take it. Man, I'm telling you that. Woo, baby. Woo. I'm telling you, she one of my best ones. That cat will have you. Yeah, you gonna be purring. You gonna be like, oh God. Oh, yeah. And then you get over them, you hovering over them like you're a film star, like you're a director. Yeah, raise her leg up. Flip it over. Yeah. Go deeper. Yeah. All that type shit. Now when you finish, can I have that icing? I need that icing, man. I need your icing. I want to make it feel like I'm feeling you on the inside. Holla. Leave that right there. Don't you touch my icing. That icing, that male icing belongs to me. Yeah. And y'all want me to believe that shit is okay. Is that what you telling me? Sick ass. Did I make it clear? Did I make y'all have a better understanding of what exactly this clown was doing? Yeah, he didn't want them, girl. That's why he handled them that way. You understand? He was there for that dang-a-line, that extra long, that jumbo. Yeah, that's what he was there for. He got turned on watching that thing. That is the real reason Cassie got them hand, feet, and toes on her, because it was Jules that was in there. He had been with Jules before. Jules was the one that had the escort service. Yes, indeed. How dare you disrespect Jules? Oh, fuck you mean? You better get your ass back in there, and I need to film. I got some people in foreign countries who is paying to see you in Jules. Yeah. Yeah. You up here they have to totally put on them hazmat suits and shit to clean the room. Yeah. The room service got more money than the female. Everybody got more money than the females. Even the maid service. Yeah, no. He gets no brownie points from me. And don't be mad at everybody. So you don't like women because it was women who told you, oh no, partner, that ain't gonna work out. What you want me to do with that? You want me to do what with it? Oh no, dog. Yeah, no. Now you want to hit me because I ain't moaning and groaning like I was with, I don't have time for that. You can't make me moan and groan, man. Yeah, so the women get popped upside the head. They get less money. You got them thinking they the only ones, and they not. They not, you'll never marry them. No. Because you don't like women. You don't like women. And I'm like, with WAC 100, just be honest. I don't like women. I like men. And I fantasize in my mind that I'm screwing the hell out of you because I can't screw the hell out of you. And it was a female who turned his ass down like, back in the day, and you ugly? I mean, you better now, but no sir. That's what this is about. The woman got paid less and were abused. Absolutely. If no is no, then why can't the men say no? But the females can't. You don't have no respect for females. None. You in love with the guy.
Understanding the complexity of the issue and the importance
but
of
one thing is for sure. You changed their business practices. You changed their title. You turned a dancer into a male hooker. And you took him across state lines. And your ass needs to sit a little while longer. Let's be clear.
Decision respectfully request that the court, regardless of the outcome, endeavor to decide the case as quickly as possible. Thank you, Your Honors.
Okay, thank you very much. We will reserve decision as we do in all cases. Let me just close by thanking counsel on both sides. This is an exceptionally difficult case. This is a question of first impression, not only for this court, but apparently for any federal court of appeals in the country. and we appreciate the quality of the briefing and argument on both sides today. So thank you very much. And with that, we have completed the business for which this court has been convened today, and I would ask that court be adjourned.
Okay. Now, so before we go, I want to hear his old. I mean, I don't know who he is. I mean, but he be all about his feelings when it comes to Diddy, even when the trial. I just want to hear what he had to say. I typically don't watch him. I tried to watch him during the trial, but he, you know, he just be too damn emotional for me. And I can't stand it when people look over the truth and lie because they like the person. Oh man, they doing it wrong. Oh man, you know, all of that type of stuff. But any man touch their daughter, their mama, their sister, they gonna lay their life down for them. They gonna unalive them. If some dude that wasn't Diddy did what Diddy did to any female or male in their family. All of that bull crap about, oh man, that ain't prostitutes. They take you let somebody take your family member across state lines and put their ass to work. Yeah, you gonna try to. Yeah, you gonna try. You gonna lay your life down. So it kills me when they get on here saying, oh man, yeah, cause a woman done told you no and you went on put that thing on in there anyway. Put our questions on Super Chat, Super Stickers, please. Okay, so let's listen to him. And I don't know what he gonna say. I just, I listened to maybe 2 minutes. One thing these people who follow celebrities need to know is these celebrities don't give a ook about them. And they so quick to defend these people. I totally agree. If he did that to anyone I love, I'll be in her asking, baby, look at here. I mean, bless her heart. He groomed her. He got her when she was 18, 19 years old. He told one of them people he liked, because he can get her to do it. He groomed her. And she thought he was her boyfriend. She thought one day they were going to have kids and shit together. He sold her that dream. He led her along. That's what groomers do. But let's listen to this clown right here, because he be all up in Diddy's ass. I wonder, do he know him personally? Have they had an entanglement? But let's listen to him. Lord, I don't know why I'm doing this.
Yo, so yesterday at the
look at it.
At the oral arguments for Puffy's appeal.
A master manipulator, Charlene.
Which took place at the second.
Don't he act like his feelings is so hurt? Like this is his brother, somebody, like a lover. I don't know, but I just don't understand a man emotions like this for another man. But let's listen to him, Lord.
Yo, so yesterday at the
look at him.
At the oral arguments for Puffy's appeal, which took place at the Second Circuit Court of Appeals in Manhattan.
What?
The one interaction that stood out for me over and above the Nardini-Shapiro interaction, which was big, but what proved bigger to me, in my opinion, what stood out more for me, was the one between Appeals Judge Miller Baker and Assistant U.S. Attorney Christy Slavic for the Southern District of New York. Appeals Judge Miller Baker cooped Christy Slavic up and started putting pressure on her to explain and articulate and to make him understand how there was no overlap in her arguing at the sentencing hearing for fraud and coercion and for
Coercion equals war and
the violence, the drugs, the
interaction.
fraud, the coercion, the force.
Equals great. Yeah.
Given that Puff got acquitted of those charges by the jury, and Appeals Judge Miller Baker went to the sentencing hearing paperwork, and he says, I have it here. What you said at the sentencing hearing. And then he went on to say that, really, the Mann Act charge was like some kind of safety valve.
Semantics. It's ridiculous.
The term he used was sideshow. It was just some kind of like safety valve. But what you really wanted, Christy Slavic, was the conviction on the racketeering conspiracy and the conviction on the SEX trafficking.
He should have got convicted on all of it. So come on.
Y'all really wanted. And when you didn't get it, then you pulled from the acquitted charges, the acquitted conduct, and used that to violate Amendment 826, which was the amendment approved by Congress and voted by the United States Sentencing Commission.
See, this is bullcrap to me because the judge, and he was, oh my God, he was very detailed, he was meticulous. The judge gave the sentence. The judge gave the sentence. Now you want to blame everybody. It's the judge that made, who provided the sentence. He has a pattern. There's a pattern. So you want to blame somebody else. Oh, you district. So what you did was approved by the Constitution of the United. He should have left that lady at the elevator. That one time she said, I'm ready to go. I don't want to do that. I got something to do. He should have let her go. But he wanted to get down on it with Jules. So you make me think you'll take that cookie too. A female can't tell you no. The answer is no. Now what? You gonna take it anyway? You gonna drag somebody down the hall? You gonna take people all across state lines because you want to get freaky with it. You want to get freaky with it over there. You want to see me work that in another state. Yeah. The answer is no. The answer is no. And he needs to sit his ass there. You sitting up here making excuses for it. Talking with intellect. You know, it's the Constitution. Like you Victor Maitland or some damn body. Boy, sit down. I can't. Ugh. Anyway.
In November 2024, that you can't use acquitted conduct to determine the guideline range.
The judge did. He has a pattern. And then on top of that, did you forget he was contacting victims while he was locked up? You can't tell him no. Has he been all up in your butt guts? Huh? Has he been in your chili lands? Cause you act like you need him out. Like you got some tricks or some shit for him. You want him in your butt guts. Yeah, you can't even look straight. You can't look straight ahead. Cause yeah. But I don't know why they say you can't feel shit that he go into. Well, it's raw. Yeah, y'all, niggas are just, y'all justify, y'all just such hypocrites. No respect for women. None.
By the McClinton versus United States case where Justice
he was contacting them in
Supreme Court Judge Sotomayor and 5 or 6 other Supreme Court judges says, yo, this acquitted conduct sentencing shit, this shit ain't right, and we need to look at this.
Hell yeah,
they did
been
not
up
grant
and
the writ of certiorari. They did not hear the case, but
so I ain't tripping case else.
An opinion saying that, yo, this ain't right. Because in that McClinton case, Devontae,
right on, Charlene,
along with another dude, they robbed this drugstore. They robbed the pharmacy.
This is the simplest way to make a freezing bedroom survivable without electricity.
This small green.
Oh hell no, you ain't.
And in the process of splitting up the proceeds from the robbery of the drugstore, one of the dudes that was involved in the robbery of the drugstore ends up dead. And Devontae McClinton is alive. So they catch Devontae McClinton and they charge him with taking the other robber's life and the robbery.
That's how they normally go. Thank you, Janet.
He gets convicted on the robbery, but the jury acquits him of the taking the life of the other dude.
He got a break.
It's a partial victory.
He better not do that in Texas.
Big victory.
Better not do that in Texas.
At sentencing, the jury acquits him of taking the other dude's joint. Beyond reasonable doubt, at trial.
The judge have a right.
Real evidence, real witnesses, real testimony.
Hey, Marie.
Exercising his 5th Amendment, 6th Amendment rights. The jury acquits him, says he's innocent. At the sentencing judge, his guideline range, based only on the robbery of the drugstore, was 5 to 6 years.
The judge can give him more. The judge can give him more.
The sentencing judge,
cause he
says, you know what?
He had a pattern.
By preponderance of the evidence, which is a lower standard than beyond reasonable doubt, the judge says, you know what? I believe you took my man's. I believe you offered.
Yeah, they got it wrong.
I don't care what the jury said.
They got it. He can do that.
I'm gonna make that determination by the preponderance of the evidence.
He can do that.
And enhance them at sentencing.
Absolutely, based on his patterns. Okay, I can give you one better. Yeah, that's what was that is what was going to happen to Hernandez Govan. Yeah, if he would have been found guilty on the smallest of things, Those enhancements, them enhancements based on his history and his pattern was going to put that ass to sleep. He was facing life. He was facing possibly death. See, that's the part of the story that Hernandez Govan don't want folk to know. His enhancements was going to send him to his death, and he know it. And if y'all go back and listen to him on Vlad, he said it. His enhancements. So don't act like this is something brand new because it's Diddy. No. He has a pattern. If you go back and listen here recently with Pooh Shiesty and them, with Finesse 2 Times. Finesse 2 Times said that they, with the feds, they got this thing and they can go by your pattern. Your ways, your mindset. Yeah, your history of how you move and groove. You better, I thought you was an attorney. I thought you knew the law, man. I thought you knew the law. Yeah, you don't know the law. Enhancements, that ain't nothing new. Yeah, so your gut butt, it wasn't nothing personal. That wasn't the first time. Yeah, now I know you miss your buddy. But he ain't the first one based on his pattern of behavior. He can't follow instructions. He thinks he's above the law. That's why he was contacting them people in jail. That's why he was telling his sons to move this, move that. Because he's a career criminal. He just been getting away with it. Yeah. Enhancements. Y'all better go back and pay attention. Even Finesse said here recently, man, they don't even have to find you guilty. And the judge can, based on your pattern. Yeah, y'all better wake up.
I believe you off, my man. I don't care what the jury said.
They got it wrong.
And I'm going to make that determination by the preponderance of the evidence.
Absolutely.
And enhance them at sentencing based on the acquitted conduct that the jury acquitted him on. And his sentence went from 5 to 6 years just for the robbery joint to 19 years.
Yeah, enhancements.
Using the acquitted conduct of taking my man's joint that the jury acquitted him on. Devontae McClinton appealed.
Yeah, YouTube will hold him.
Court.
Especially if you gotta disguise your words.
Barrett, Gorish, Clarence Thomas.
They real strict. Clarence Thomas, what did he say?
Enhance your membership with the American Express.
Yeah, them enhancements was finna wear Hernandez Govan. That's why he had all them bags and shit under his eyes. That's why he was crying. Talking about my son. And where he at now? He left his son, didn't he? Mm-hmm.
And 2 or 3 other Supreme Court justices, and even Scalia said something about it, even though he wrote an opposing opinion. But he said he was only writing that opposing opinion because he just didn't want to be.
Diddy ain't the first one that what do they call them? Enhancements was going to get. Boy, get off of that. He don't need to break the law.
Supreme Court justices, and even Scalia said something about it, even though he wrote an opposing opinion. But
if he can't handle that jail, stop breaking the law.
19 years using the acquitted conduct of taking my man's joint that the jury acquitted him on. Devontae McClinton appealed this case to the Supreme Court. And that's when Justice Sotomayor, Barrett, Gorish, Clarence Thomas, and 2 or 3 other Supreme Court justices, And even Scalia said something about it, even though he wrote an opposing opinion. But he said he was only writing that opposing opinion because he just didn't want to be unanimous on the side of all the others. He wanted to offer a different point of view, but he said that something needs to be done about this. And
stop breaking the law.
That's where the Amendment 826 came in November 2024, the Sentencing Commission, which was to close that window that you can't use acquitted conduct to enhance somebody's sentence at sentencing. And Miller Baker, the appeals judge, he was all over Christy Slavic for that. Man. He said, man, that's what you did. He said, explain to me why we should allow fraud and coercion and the grouping and the leadership enhancement to stand for Puff when he was acquitted of those. And Christy Slavic had no answer. She started stuttering. Then she said something. He says no. She tried to say something else. The appeals judge, Miller Baker, says no. Answer the question. Why should we let this sentence stand? And it's got acquitted conduct in there that you really used to argue for the racketeering conspiracy and the SX trafficking, but then when you lost that, you start arguing for sentencing, and then your PSR
that judge made that decision. And I know for a fact that judge has it all lined up why and how he reached that
and then he asked her again
decision.
He says, do you believe that 50-month sentence?
People ask me.
The judge felt like it. I don't, you killing me. The judge felt like it.
I always tell them the same thing.
He deserved more.
Is warranted for a
hell
man.
Yeah.
And Christy Slavic started going all around the tree, up the street, down the corner. He said, no. Bring it back and answer the question. Do you think that a 50-month sentence is justified for Puff? And she started talking about some other shit again. And, you know, she had no explanation. She had nothing. She had no explanation. Because
did we hear her not have no explanation, y'all? See, people like this, oh Lord, I don't even, this is why I don't like to listen to liars. I heard both of them jumping around trying to argue the case. I heard them both. But you miss your buddy. I'm going to say it again. You need to talk to your boy. Yeah. And tell him if somebody say no, it's no, man. Move on to the next one. You Diddy. You can get somebody else. Find somebody who going to be okay with that. But keep your hands to yourself. And if at any time they say, no, I don't want to do it, then you make them guys get back. Yeah, you had a business. You had a business, Diddy. And you know it was more to your business than carrying them across state lines. Because you were interviewed by Donald Trump to be a part of his pyramid. And both of y'all was ego tripping. But he wanted to take a chance with somebody for the darker shades of the 50 Shades of Brown. And he felt like, what did he say? You know, I think, you know, they will, you know, give it some time. They will come to like you. See, they didn't have many darker shades of the 50 Shades of Brown. But you pulled Diddy up under you, Trump. Yeah, you know Auntie Fee know. My tea sippers know too. That's why, and you told him that he was going to be protected. Being a part of the elite, what I call them, elite organized crime. But where you messed up, Diddy, is where he went into politics. You didn't want that. So then you tried to separate, and you know how you really knew how he felt about black people. But you was playing with the devil. And then when you found out the agenda with the New World Order and the slavery, then you want to warn of the darker shades of the 50 Shades of Brown. Yeah. And then you said some ill things about it. But you still thought you was covered. They was going to protect you. Although you backdoored him. Not backdoored him, but you was stabbing him in his back. Yeah, I can tell you how the shit went down. Diddy. And then when you was locked up and he wasn't moving, he was dangling, then you thought that you was gonna do him who brought you in, who told you that you are protected. You tried to blackmail the blackmailer. And he said, look at this man. Yeah, he really think I like him. No. He got the game twisted. You can't blackmail me. And that's why your ass still sitting in jail. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you got the gist of it. We're going to have, they say we'll probably know in June or July or so if he is going to be, they said we're going to have to think about it. We're going to let you know in writing. Is he going home for the weekend or anytime soon to have a freak out? No. That's what happened, Charlene. Yeah, make perfect. Oh, yeah. Yep, Auntie Fee, no. Baby, once I saw that interview, and we know Trump don't like nobody. I ain't seen no interview with him and Jay-Z. Nope. But he damn sure had one right after that New York shooting where Sean took his charges for him. He in there bragging about breaking folk jaws and all that type of shit. What I think they are in their ego tripping on who's the better businessman and who is who. And Diddy smart ass said, well, we just alike. You just may hide yours better than I hide mine. Trump just looking at him, moving their head like he's some type of cyborg or something. You know how he do his head. His youngest son do his head like that. Like they really are reptilians. Yeah. And he was gonna try to push you. That's why to them Jews, them fake ones. I wonder, did he drink that blood? Maybe that's why everything had to be red. Yeah, I just seen Jay-Z now. Whoa. Oh, you nailed it. Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, y'all. I'm finna go. I gotta get a nap. I didn't sleep at all last night. It's too much stuff going on, but we gotta stay on top of it. Because they will play in our face. They want us to stay blind to it. They don't want us to catch on to it until it's too late. Melania, yeah. Some victim of hers is popping out. I got that live set at, I think, around 5. So I got to go and take a nap. Okay? Hit the like button. Hit the like button, y'all. And don't come in later on. I hope you like, share, subscribe. Get you a membership. Come in hitting the like button. Support the platform. Okay? Okay, good people. I made $2.40 today on this live. $2.40. And I've been on here 4 hours. Please don't make that happen again. I'm looking at y'all with my side eye. Okay. Okay, Miss Tom. See you at 5. I can't wait. Dun, 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 dun. Y'all have a good one.